This is the Troll Patrol, live with Justin FREAKIN.
Apparently, I'm not supposed to put up the Halloween graphics when there's been a mass shooting. Which I hate to tell you, Warlord, which would mean that I can't have Halloween graphics up at any time, because it's just another day in mass shooting USA. Yes, my plan was to cover the January 6th committee hearing this morning, but external factors out of my control made that impossible. But we're going to cover that after the two debates we were watching tonight. Now, unfortunately, the two debates are going on at the same time, so we're going to take the Michigan gubernatorial debate live. That is Republican nominee and Trump-backed candidate Tudor Dixon, who is a nut job, taking on Democratic incumbent Gretchen Whitmer. That is going to happen here in less than 10 minutes. Then directly after, we will watch a tape-delayed version of Ron Johnson and Mandela Barnes in Wisconsin. Yes, we're going to talk all about the January 6th hearing where they subpoenaed Trump. We've got video of Pelosi. We've got Liz Cheney running down all of the times that Trump associates took the fifth. Lots of stuff to cover. Yes, Tudor Dixon is the most Confederate-sounding name, despite the fact that she is in Michigan. Very Confederate-sounding name. Apparently there's been an active shooter, or there is currently an active shooter in North Carolina. We're going to check in on that in Raleigh. Cops in Connecticut were ambushed. 2 of them at least died. We're going to talk about that. The jurors in the Parkland shooter case are answering questions after they reached a verdict of life in prison for the Parkland shooter. Trump has also started a new company, apparently in an attempt to avoid accountability with the New York State Attorney General. Judge is also denying Trump's request to pause a deposition in a hearing about him raping somebody. So it looks like that's going to move forward. Plus, I have another batshit crazy right-winger that went to a school board meeting to protest drag shows. Because just like mass shootings in the United States, it happens every fucking day. So once again, we are minutes away from the Tudor Dixon Gretchen Whitmer debate in Michigan. Directly after, we are going to watch the Mandela Barnes Ron Johnson debate in the Wisconsin Senate race. We're going to watch that on tape delay right after we watch the Tudor Dixon Gretchen Whitmer debate. Here's your meme of the day. Alex Jones telling his kids about his new place in a van down by the river. Is following the almost $1 billion judgment against Alex Jones. This particular drag show is being protested because it was being put on by a gender reassignment clinic. So they're really upset about this one. Also, the woman's batshit crazy, and I tried to find her connection to right-wing groups that are probably paying her. I couldn't, but I can show you where she's been a part of other batshit crazy right-wing protests, like the anti-vaxxer movement. We'll be going to WOOD, Channel 8 in Michigan. Here in about 5 minutes, they will have the Dixon-Whitmer debate for us. Wood TV. Right after the Whitmer-Dixon debate, we're going to be watching Democratic nominee Mandela Barnes, who's the current lieutenant governor of Wisconsin. Apparently, new polling shows that Johnson is opening up a bigger lead against Barnes. Ron Johnson, of course, being quite possibly the dumbest person in the U.S. Senate. Tommy Tuberville, recently elected senator from Alabama, giving him a run for his money. Wood Channel sounds like porn. I wonder if they live in sexual anarchy.
You live in sexual anarchy?
You're on Wood TV. I'm not high enough for this shit. I don't even, like, my buddy called me to get high, and I feel like I hit the bong, but I didn't actually get it. As I was talking to him, I feel like I hit the bong, but I didn't actually get high. So let me pack this bong right here. Because you know I'm going to need it for Tudor Dixon. I'm definitely going to need it for Ron Johnson. Apparently, they have called off the third debate. So this second debate that we are going to watch between Mandela Barnes and Ron Johnson in Wisconsin will indeed be the last debate. The second debate they've had. They were tentatively scheduled to have a third debate. Apparently that's been called off. Just like the Lake Hobbs debate was called off in Arizona last night. I was really looking forward to that one. Carrie Lake accusing PBS in Arizona of impartiality by inviting Katie Hobbs, the former Secretary of State of Arizona, on for an interview. She said it made it easier for Hobbs to be able to duck a debate. What it do? Not many people like fucking Republicans, idiot. Like, you guys are so fucking unpopular. You're in here talking about Democrats. Like, nobody likes fucking Republicans. You're all goddamn stupid. Right-wingers are morons. Absolute dumbest fucks walking the planet. It is exhausting. It is exhausting being around you people. Definitely not high enough for this shit. And once again, this is Wood TV. I figured they'd be doing like a pre-show already. Apparently they are not. This is the live feed. It should be coming to us any minute now for the coverage. I'll talk shit about you all day long. Right-wingers are fucking morons. I can't help it. Even Rush Limbaugh called it before he died.
As a conservative, it's getting harder and harder to not look like a kook.
Yeah, because you guys are fucking stupid. You don't live in reality. You're fond of fallacious arguments. Get your information from right-wing propaganda sites. Yeah, I was trolling PragerU earlier today, and this woman brought up Janine Pirro, and I'm like, what did I call her? Dumbass drunktard or something? Drunkard. Dumbass drunkard or something. And somebody responded, no, that's Nancy Pelosi. And I'm like, fuck Nancy Pelosi. What now? Come on, people. Come on.
Come on, man.
Also, I thought October 13th was a great day to break out the Halloween graphics. I wasn't going to break them out until Sunday. You got them a few days early because it's October 13th. So it's a good day to break out Halloween graphics. This is supposed to be the debate. It is 7 o'clock now, and we do not have a feed yet, so let's make sure we are on the right page. This page also, same thing. Tweeted out 3 minutes ago, the debate starts now. Are we on the feed now? The other window. Oh, there it is. There was their live stream feed. Boom.
Food prices and just the price of living.
What are they going to do about inflation?
This is the Michigan Gubernatorial debate.
This November.
My major concern is the
Front-backed Republican candidate, Tudor Dixon.
Governor Gretchen Whitmer and challenger Tudor Dixon address
Democratic incumbent Gretchen
Answer
Whitmer.
your questions in their first ever televised debate.
First and only
In the
debate.
TV8 studio, it's the debate for governor. Here's
Directly following this, we'll be watching the Mandela-Barnes-Ron Johnson debate in the Wisconsin Senate race. So stick around.
Grand Rapids and being seen and heard on
Once
our
again, I'm going to try to lay out as much as possible while the candidates are speaking.
two major party candidates for governor. Democrat Gretchen Whitmer and Republican Tudor Dixon will debate the issue.
You guys can be sure that I'm not high enough for this shit.
That they are interested in. Quickly, here's an overview of the very basic rules. Each candidate will have 60 seconds to answer each question. An automatic 30
And
seconds.
we are going to do a quick rundown of the news following the two debates.
Response. After that, we move on to the next question for the next hour. The candidates' campaigns participated in a virtual drawing recently that has Governor Gretchen Whitmer giving the first 90-second opening statement. Governor, thank you for being here, and please begin.
Great. Thank you, Rick, and thank you, Wood TV, for hosting us. You know, I grew up in this community about 10 miles from here. I grew up in a household that was bipartisan, and we had very different perspectives, but we shared values. And that's how I know. When we stay focused on what really matters, it's a lot easier to see we all want the same things. Great schools, good jobs, safe roads, and communities. As governor, I've signed over 900 bills, every one of them bipartisan. I will work with anyone who's serious about solving problems. And that's how we made the biggest
Wood
investment
TV.
in state history.
You live
public
in
education.
sexual
It's how we
anarchy.
put 170,000 Michiganders on paths to higher education and skills, tuition free. It's how we secured the future of the auto industry is built here in Michigan. We also paid down $14 billion of state debt, amassed a record rainy day fund, and not only did we not raise taxes, we cut taxes for small business. I think tonight you're going to hear a lot of divisive rhetoric and a focus on the past from my opponent. Here's what separates us. I still believe there is more that unites us than divides us. I believe in our democracy. I believe in decency, and that's what I'm going to focus on tonight and every minute I'm governor of this great state. Let's work together and build a better future for our kids.
Mrs. Dixon, welcome to the debate. Thank you for being here. Your 90-second opening
What up,
statement.
Tudor?
Good evening, Michigan. I'm excited to be here because for many of you, it's the first time you're hearing from me directly. I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a cancer survivor, and I'm a worker. I used to work many hours on the shop floor of a steel foundry, and I've owned a small business that was crushed by lockdowns in this state, like many of you. I also know what it is to have my children locked out of school and then have to try to get them back on track. I know how important it is to have safe communities so that we don't have to worry about our kids going out to play outside. And I'm running for governor because, quite frankly, Gretchen Whitmer has let us down. The last 4 years have been disappointing at best. Everything is more expensive. Our communities are less safe. Our job creators struggle to create jobs, and many are saying they think the American dream in the state of Michigan is dead. Our schools are getting worse, and our roads haven't been fixed. I'm sure you remember the promises that this governor made 4 years ago right here on this stage. She's going to try to attack me tonight to distract from her broken promises, her record of broken promises. But I'm going to focus on the future. I'm going to talk about how to make Michigan freer and more prosperous. We're going to forge a family-friendly future.
Candidates both, thank you
Austin,
very much.
Mandy, good evening.
First question, and it is sensitive, it's deeply personal, and it's very topical, and it's not surprising.
Talking about abortion?
One of the most often question asked from our viewers was about abortion. Each one of those questions came with a point of view. It came with what people were
What up,
feeling,
Jenkins?
and sometimes it was agonizing to read some
Chainsaw,
of
good
those
evening.
questions. But what I wanted to do, truly do, is I want to get to where you are on this issue very clearly. Ron from Allendale did a really good job. He asked it pretty simply when he said, please clearly explain your views on abortion. And to help Ron get to that answer, I'm going to ask you, and I will hold you to this if I can, if you support abortion rights, I want you to tell me what, if any, limitations you would accept. If you oppose abortion rights, I want you to tell me what, if any, exceptions you would allow. Governor Whitmer, your first question for 60 seconds.
This is an important question. When the Supreme Court overruled Roe v. Wade, it took away rights that we've had for 49 years, rights that I've had my whole life are now been ripped away from women and girls in this country. Michigan could revert to a 1931 law that makes it a felony, no exceptions for rape or incest, criminalizing doctors and nurses. The only reason that law is not in effect right now is because of my lawsuit stopping it. When Roe fell, Mrs. Dixon celebrated that. She said it didn't even go far enough. She said she wanted to make abortion a felony, no exceptions for rape, incest, or health of the woman, and throw doctors and nurses in jail. That is too extreme and too dangerous. We know that our fundamental rights are very much at risk right now. I am fighting to protect our right to choose. My lawsuit would have kept the law as it is. Our legislature wouldn't take action, and so now we have a ballot initiative to vote on. I will be voting yes.
Governor, thank you. I hope in your rebuttal you will answer that question about any limitations. Mrs. Dixon, I want to know if you oppose abortion rights, what exceptions would you make?
Yes, in her first answer, she's already being dishonest. This is obviously going to be a theme for the night. I've never said that I wanted to criminalize people. I've never said I wanted this to be a felony. She just is completely making that up. My position on abortion is clear. I am pro-life with exceptions for life of the mother. But I understand that this is going to be decided by the people of the state of Michigan or by a judge. As the governor's already stated, a judge has already ruled in this case. Please understand that the governor doesn't have the choice to go around a judge or a constitutional amendment. She will lie to you tonight and tell you that the governor can do something about a constitutional amendment. But you need to understand that it's very clearly written, and you should understand her position. It's extremely radical. It's abortion up to the moment of birth. She's already proven it with her record of voting. She voted no on a ban on partial birth abortion. That's how radical Gretchen Whitmer is on abortion, and she'll continue lying to you now.
Governor, I'd like for you to define your position on abortion.
Mrs. Dixon is either woefully underinformed about the office she's running for, or she's lying to you. It's that simple. A governor will absolutely impact these rights. In fact, the only right abortion is still accessible in Michigan is because of my action. This is a candidate who said a 14-year-old child raped by a family member is a perfect example of why we shouldn't have abortion rights. I've been fighting to maintain the law as it is. That's what I support, Rick. Here's the fact of the matter. To protect our rights, we cannot trust Ms. Dixon.
Are there any limitations, Governor?
Rick, my lawsuit would have preserved the status quo with the limitations that are on the books right now. The legislature wouldn't enact it, and that's precisely why we are going to the ballot now.
Thank you. Your rebuttal, Mrs. Dixon.
She's clearly stated she has no limitations. She doesn't even want parental consent. That's what the proposal that she's out there talking about every single day says. She's lying about my position, and I can see why she's a little confused about a constitutional amendment, because this is a governor who time and time again thought she was above the Constitution of Michigan. In fact, the people had to go to the Supreme Court to try to rip her powers away, even though she held on to them like grim death. This is how she's going to treat the people of Michigan. It is not how I will.
Our second question deals with part of the same issue. And
I believe she was referring to COVID restrictions.
A proposal 3, that is dealing with abortion rights. Now, this may or may
weird to
not
say grim death
between the governor and the legislature.
In an analogy referring to COVID restrictions.
To the degree that you support or oppose this initiative, I want to know, and I want you to answer Alexander's question, and this comes from Walker. The first question will go to you. I would like to know if both candidates agree to uphold the will of the voters, no matter if Proposal 3 poses or fails. And you've already spoken to this to some degree, Mrs. Dixon, but in other words, if you're elected and Proposal 3 has passed, will you do anything to try to change it or to go around it or to somehow go against that vote?
You're right, Rick. I've been very clear on this, and I've made this statement multiple times. I will always respect the will of the voter. I don't believe that there are laws that I'm above. Unlike the governor here, who said on multiple occasions, if there's a law out there that I don't agree with, I think I should be able to go around it. And Dana Nessel, who has also decided to go around laws. I don't believe in that. I believe in our Constitution, and I believe in the people's right to decide.
Do you hear the moderator go,
Governor, if you're elected governor and Proposal 3 fails, will you then look for other legislative solutions, or will you accept that as the will of the people?
Well, I'll always accept the will of the people, Rick. But here's the fact of the matter. I still have a lawsuit that's pending in front of the Supreme Court. And so ultimately, that too will have to be decided. I think it's really ironic when Mrs. Dixon stands here and says that she will accept the will of the people. This is a candidate who still denies the outcome of the 2020 election. This is a candidate who will not pledge to accept the outcome of the November 8th election. So for her to stand here and say she will respect the will of the people when she has not even embraced the outcome of a last election or pledged to embrace the outcome of a future election tells me we cannot trust what she's saying. These are fundamental rights. We cannot make any assumption that a Dixon administration would fight to protect women's rights, women's access to health care, and families who are trying to grow their family through IVF is one additional example.
A 30-second rebuttal and plenty to talk about there.
Yeah, if we're talking about protecting women, then we should go through a few of the vetoes that the governor has had recently. Vetoing safe housing for pregnant women. That's pretty tragic. Also, vetoing any grant funding for parents who just want to adopt and have a family. She also vetoed funding for critical pregnancy centers because she said they offered information on adoption. That's not exactly family friendly. So once again, the governor is being dishonest with you. She wants abortion to be your only option.
30-second rebuttal, Governor.
That's ridiculous. Like so much of what I think we're going to hear tonight, we know what the law is. We know what women demand and women require in their reproductive health care. We also know what this candidate for governor has said about
she vetoed it because
rights,
it was mostly geared towards connections to fake women's health centers.
Future generations of women and girls. The most important economic decision a woman will make in her lifetime is whether and when to bear a child. This candidate for governor wants to rip that away from her.
Candidates, we're going to move on, and this is going to be the first of our video questions. As you know, we ask our viewers to submit questions, and a few of them we reached out to and asked them to record the verbatim of what they asked us. And this first one, it really struck me because each of us
taking TikToks now is what he's saying.
In public schools or in college. And Carson from Grand Rapids has an important question that I feel certain is shared by many of us and many of his peers. You can see it right over here.
As a high school student, school safety is a top priority for me. What will you do in order to keep our schools safe and ensure protection to all Michigan students?
Well, I've got a message to the kids out there.
There are so many pressures for kids in school these days, and I would expand Kason's question to say this. Sherry from Troy wants to know, in addition to school safety, how do you support students' mental health in schools? Governor, I'll begin with you. 60 seconds.
Sure, Rick. Well, we've made historic investments in education. That includes wraparound supports for mental health. I've listened to parents, and I know school safety and mental health of our students is paramount. I gotta tell you, as a prosecutor, I led the efforts to get prepared for a new school year, active shooter drills with our police officers. As a mom, I am furious. I'm angry that
what the cops gonna do?
Only in the this country, the #1 killer of children is gun violence. As governor, we need to act. I support secure storage. I support background checks. I support red flag laws. My opponent, on the other hand, does not. She's proposed more guns, less oversight, and eliminating gun-free zones. She claimed not to even know what safe storage was, which is exactly what the Oxford families have been lobbying for. That kind of out-of-touch governance only makes our kids more at risk when they're in our schools.
Mrs. Dixon, 60 seconds on keeping children safe in schools and their mental health.
Yeah, in 2018, our state police released a Safe Schools report. That Safe Schools report covered everything from hardening our schools.
Well, throw it away because the cops don't know what they're doing.
Was taken care of, and making sure we're seeing those flags when we see a child that's in danger. The governor hasn't even come out.
Do the opposite of whatever the cops recommended.
The Michigan Department of Ed has now come out and said there are times when we can hide a dangerous situation from parents. If a student wants to harm themselves or someone else, we should hide it from the parents. We've never seen something like this before. We're in really scary times. We need to trust our experts. When our state police come out with a report like that, we need to take it very seriously. The money that we've received so far from the federal government could have been used to harden our schools over this summer, but nothing happened. We really need to take that money and focus on how to keep our kids safe inside of those buildings.
30 seconds. Governor Whitmer, as a rebuttal, please.
The same month as the Oxford school shooting, where 4 children were murdered, 8 were injured, and the community was terrorized, Tutor Dixon posted on her social media a picture of her shooting a gun.
Old Tutor.
With the caption that said, "Gun control means using both hands." She is too dangerous and too out of touch to be trusted with protecting our kids. She'll put the Second Amendment before second graders every time. We cannot let that happen.
Mrs. Dixon, you have 30 seconds.
Gretchen Whitmer's made it pretty clear. She wants to make sure she takes away any protection you can have. She wouldn't allow protection even inside of the school, where we know that's the best case scenario if we have someone that can shoot down a shooter, shoot down a threat. But she doesn't want anything like that. She wants to make sure your kids are in a sitting duck zone, where there can be no guns and there's no protection against them. The idea that she thinks that having any type of weapon is too dangerous for the state of Michigan, she'll take all of your guns away.
Mrs. Dixon, the next question.
The moderator keeps sighing at her.
The subject of schools. And this is rather broad because, again, it's a subject that we got so many questions about, and I couldn't get every nuance in there. So I want you to talk about your view of education, how schools should operate, how you think that should work. But included in that, we know that Michigan's public schools are always an issue in a governor's race, and the same is true now. I want you to tell me
from Parkland.
Discussion of your view on schools, the specifics as governor that you'll work to ensure that the best possible outcomes for all students in public schools are achieved, not just in the high-achieving schools, but in some schools that we know are struggling.
Sure. In our schools right now, we're seeing that we have incredibly low reading scores. We've talked about this for years, but after the pandemic and kids being out of school for almost 2 years, we've gone through a crisis, and we don't have an opportunity right now to catch our kids back up. Michigan is one of the
kids out of school for almost 2 years. What is she talking about?
Tutoring plan for our students. We've talked about 25 hours for every child to make sure they get back on track. We need to get our kids back to reading and back to the basics. Right now in Michigan schools, as you're seeing on the news, parents are really concerned about what their kids are being taught with this sex and gender theory and not teaching them to read, write, and do math. We've made it very clear. We want parents involved in the child's education, and we want to go back to the basics, making sure our kids know how to read, write, and do math. From kindergarten to 3rd grade, they're learning to read. From 3rd grade on, they're reading to learn. If they're missing that crucial step, we're robbing them.
Governor, let's hear what you have to say about that and how we make sure that all students have, as clearly as possible, the same opportunities in all of our public schools.
Absolutely. I love this.
Decouple funding from property taxes.
Michigan public schools. I went to Forest Hill Schools right down the road. This is personal for me. I know that an education is what levels the playing field and creates opportunity for every person. And that's why I worked with the legislature in a bipartisan manner, and we delivered the biggest investment in public education in Michigan history. We closed the gap between districts. We ensured that we've got wraparound supports, whether it comes to mental health supports or tripling the number of literacy coaches. We're dropping class size and luring great people to go into teaching. That is how we ensure that all kids have a great education. We are making great strides. There is certainly more good work to do. We want to be a top 10 state when it comes to literacy, individualized tutors. But I need you to know this. The person bankrolling Mrs. Dixon's campaign is Betsy DeVos. Why is that? Because they want to take $500 million out of our public schools.
You have 30 seconds.
It is a scam to funnel public money into private institutions.
She closed the gap. What she really did was close the schools. And when we talk about making sure there is no wrong path for any child, you should know that when Detroit public schools kept their schools closed longer, she was silent. When Flint public schools closed their schools down again, Gretchen Whitmer was silent. In fact, in the midst of the pandemic, when the legislature said they would give her money for reading scholarships, one of her people came out and said, smelled too much like vouchers because they don't want parents to have control. She doesn't want you to have an impact on your child's
I don't want public money going to religious and private institutions.
Betsy DeVos' voucher plan might help Betsy DeVos, and it might help Tutor Dixon too, because her kids go to private schools. I don't have a problem with kids going to private schools. That's her choice. But the fact of the matter is that most kids don't have those options. And that's why we've got to improve the education system across the state of Michigan so that every child has a great education. A governor's job isn't just to take care of our own kids, it's to take care of all of our kids.
Candidates, we're going to move on to another subject that was very high on the list, as you will understand. And people wanted to know 1,000 questions, that's an exaggeration, about the state's response to COVID-19. And there's no way to go through all of the questions. So as we sat around trying to think of a way that we could get to that question and give it some depth, here's what we want to do. Instead of going one by one through every grievance or why did this happen or why didn't this happen, I want you to think back. Given the advantage of 2.5
Notice how he keeps sighing every time Tutor Dixon answers a question. It is hilarious to me.
Always particularly good. I want to first ask you, Governor, looking back, if there is anything that you would have done differently. And Ms. Dixon, when I get to you, I want to ask you, if you had been governor, what would you have done differently? Governor?
Well, let's start with this. COVID was incredibly hard on every single one of us. We know that this was a brand new virus that we didn't know a lot about. We knew that our hospitals were filling up and that people were dying. We were in desperate search of masks and ventilators. There were refrigerated trucks outside of some of our hospitals to store people's bodies who didn't survive COVID. It was a desperate time. So I talked to the experts. I listened. I asked questions of our national experts, of state experts. I talked to my fellow governors, Republicans and Democrats, and we helped one another as we made tough decisions because lives were on the line. Studies have shown that our actions saved thousands of lives. Now, 35,000 people in our state have died from COVID. They may not matter to some, but they matter to me, every single one of them. If I could go back in time with the knowledge we have now, sure, I would have made some different decisions. But we were working in the middle of a crisis and lives were on the line.
Mrs. Dixon, given the information that we had 2.5 years ago, what do you think you would have done differently if you were governor?
Well, the governor wants you to believe that she did listen to the experts, but we have the letter from the Nursing Home Association that said, whatever you do, don't send COVID-positive patients into nursing homes. And yet the governor did. When Andrew Cuomo even backed off of this, Governor Whitmer doubled down. She even tried to hide the final report of the numbers of how many deaths we had. In fact, she's tried to hide a lot from this pandemic. She tried to hide, or she did hide, effectively, why her Department of Health and Human Services director left. In fact, she even paid him off with a secrecy agreement. The same with unemployment. What a debacle to have $8.5 billion fraudulently sent out. Now I've got people bringing bills from the state up to me, begging me to forgive the unemployment that she's trying to get out back because she accidentally sent $8.5 billion out. And what about our students that she kept locked out of schools and wouldn't listen to parents when they begged her to let them play? Let them play. She wouldn't even listen.
Governor, you have 30 seconds.
None of what my opponent just said is true. It just isn't. Here are the facts. While my life was being threatened for making hard decisions to save lives across our state, Mrs. Dixon was spreading conspiracy theories. Mrs. Dixon was downplaying masks, saying that this would go away without getting vaccinated. She said kids couldn't get COVID. Had she been governor during the pandemic, thousands more people would have died. A lot of those deaths would have been in our nursing homes.
30 seconds.
Unfortunately for Gretchen Whitmer, everybody knows that I have been vaccinated, and she's completely dishonest. But she can't be honest because she knows that her response was so completely horrendous. In fact, she closed restaurants down longer than any other state, and we lost 3,000 restaurants. But we just got a report today, Michigan is having a slower comeback than any of our surrounding states. So not only did she make bad choices when she closed us down and refused to open our schools, but she hasn't figured out how to recover.
Candidates, we move on, and this is one of the more unusual questions that I've ever had because we've never been quite here since I've been covering politics in the state of Michigan. Michigan has rarely had more of a robust treasury. There has been more money that has come through. Some of it is federal, a lot of it is state money. There are billions of dollars that are still unallocated, even after the largest budget ever and the largest school aid fund ever. So my question is, and it goes first to you, Mrs. Dixon, what do you do with that money? Do you save it? Do you spend it? Give it back to taxpayers? None of the above? What do you do with maybe $6 or $7 billion?
Well,
your water is not fixed, and the former governor is trying to get out of being held accountable for it.
Are getting caught back up. As I stated earlier, Michigan is one of the only states that didn't implement a robust tutoring system after the pandemic to get our students back on track. And the test scores show. Right now, our third graders just failed their literacy exams nearly 60% across the state. And in Detroit, 90%. So when we talk about making sure there's no wrong path, that hasn't happened in the state of Michigan. We have the funding to make sure our public schools have the resources that they need. It's time for us to use them to make sure our kids get back on track and focus on the basics. Get back to reading, writing, and math. The governor still has not made a comment about the fact that parents are begging for our schools to go back to the basics and get our kids back on track.
Governor?
Let's talk about a few stats. Michigan's economic recovery is the fastest than any we've seen in our history. We have one of the strongest economic recoveries in the country. We know that we are seeing small business growth that's outpaced any year that we've seen in the last 23 years. We've made record investments when it comes to securing the future of the auto industry here. General Motors, $7 billion building batteries. Ford, Stellantis. It's not just about autos. It's about the future of manufacturing, future of life sciences. Perigo moved their headquarters from Florida here to Grand Rapids. Pfizer expanded in Kalamazoo. We're also onshoring chip production to bring supply chains home from China to Michigan. KLA, SK Siltron, Calumet Electronics, Hemlock Semiconductor. We are building the future of the economy. And we're also training our workforce so that they can get into those good paying jobs you can raise a family on. 170,000 Michiganders are signed up for our opportunities tuition-free to get educations and skills.
Mrs. Dixon, 30 seconds, please.
If the governor could just be honest, the report came out today showing that Michigan is in a terribly slow recovery. In fact, we've lost more small businesses than any other state except for New York. We're tied for losing the most small businesses. We've also lost 82,000 jobs while Gretchen Whitmer was in office, and she hasn't saved the automotive industry. She's only trying to save face now because she knows Ford left and went to Kentucky and Tennessee. And when she was asked, her response was, I think we didn't know.
Governor?
That's ridiculous. Listen, we are top 10 state for new business. We are the #1 state in the nation for clean energy job growth. We have put our fiscal house in order. My opponent is proposing a $12 billion cut to our budget. She likes to say she has business in the steel industry, but in a time when that industry had record profits, her company didn't pay the gas bill, didn't pay the trash bill, didn't pay their employees, and got sued dozens of times by other businesses they didn't pay either.
Let's stay with Michigan's budget to some degree, and it also talks on another topic that was discussed a lot in this studio 4 years ago. And we'll go to you, Governor, first with this. There has been more money put back into Michigan's budget for roads. Some of that came from bonding you did early on. Some of it's coming from the infrastructure package. But here's the problem. Michigan roads, all roads, but Michigan roads always need to be fixed. It's a perpetual type of thing. And I thought John from Muskegon came up with a great question because he worries about this. He says, with the current push towards electric vehicles, are the gas taxes going to be raised even more to pay for road repairs since the EVs aren't paying for gas tax? My question is, are we going to need a new revenue stream and maybe even a new distribution formula for funding roads going forward?
John is brilliant. He's making an observation that is really smart, and I appreciate that. You know, we listened to people as I got all across the state of Michigan when I first ran for governor. And we know that when you've got to replace the rims on your car, it's money out of rent or childcare. This is a fundamental for Michigan families. And so we've already rebuilt 13,000 lane miles, 900 bridges. There are orange cones and barrels all over the state because we are fixing the dam roads and moving dirt. But you don't overcome decades of disinvestment in 4 years. It is going to be an ongoing need. The $4.8 billion that I worked with in a bipartisan way with the legislature to get done will help us do more when it comes to fixing our roads, rebuilding our bridges, fixing water infrastructure that brings water into our homes. The Biden administration sent us billions with the Infrastructure and Jobs Act. I'm grateful for that. That will help. But as we think about the transition that's happening in our auto industry, our solution for roads is going to have to transition as well.
Mrs. Dixon, it's going to be a question the next governor is going to have to deal with.
Yeah, I'm sure this question was asked because 4 years ago on this stage, the governor was asked if she would raise taxes to pay for the roads that she said she was going to fix, which we now know her own roads commission says are in worse shape than when she took office. In fact, she said no, she wasn't going to raise the taxes. That was ridiculous. It was nonsense. You've heard those words come out of her mouth a few times tonight as well. Just remember that when she was saying those words 4 years ago, then one of her first acts when she got into office was to try to raise your gas taxes by 45 cents. In fact, when she says she's worked in a bipartisan manner, she's actually vetoed road funding in the past because she didn't get her way on 45-cent gas tax. You're right, we will have to figure out a way to fund the roads. It's going to take public-private partnership in the future, but it's going to be a ways out because the entire country is not going to go to EV vehicles overnight.
Governor, 30 seconds to respond.
I think the evidence is all across the state, despite what Mrs. Dixon's commercials say. We are fixing the dam roads. We are moving dirt. We are using the right mix and materials, and they are built to last. But you don't overcome decades of disinvestment overnight. We recognize that there is a lot of good work to do. When you see those orange barrels, see that as a sign of progress, and remember to please slow down. There are hardworking men and women on the side of the road risking their lives to rebuild infrastructure to power our economy and keep our families safe.
30 seconds.
You'll notice that as soon as another election was coming up, she started to put people out on the roads. The governor didn't fulfill her promise. In fact, when she asked just a few months ago, didn't you promise to fix the roads? She said, no, I didn't promise, at least not in the first term. Now she's saying it'll take a second term and maybe even several more terms just to do what she promised in the first place, which she knew she couldn't do. But she wanted to earn your vote then, and now she's trying to get your vote again.
Mrs. Dixon, I'm going to turn to crime and policing. I, again, was surprised by the number of questions that we got about this. And I looked up a few statistics, and there are some that support the idea. This is from 2019 to 2021, the last year that numbers are available, and it comes from the incident crime reporting from the Michigan State Police. And they show that there are some violent crimes that are on the rise, but in fairness, robbery, rape, and most property crimes, other than auto theft, are on decline. However, as governor, how can you promote a reduction in crime? And what is your view on the question from a viewer in Grand Rapids who says, and by the way, this has been thrown around in this campaign, so I thought it was appropriate. Knowing that there still continues to be a defund the police movement out there, then what is your plan to rid our state of such violence so that taxpayers who fund government and the police agencies can feel safe again in their own homes?
Yeah, this is such an important question because we know the governor came out and said that she supports the spirit of defund the police. In fact, we know that when we were all locked down, she went out and marched with folks who held up signs that said defund the police. I'm actually endorsed by the largest police union in the state, the Police Officers Association of Michigan, and more than 24 sheriffs, including Democrats, because they are so upset about the fact that the governor doesn't support them. My plan will put $1 billion new into policing to make sure they know they're supported, but also to recruit and retain new police officers. It's so challenging to bring police officers to a state where the chief executive officer has supported defund the police. We're going to make sure that not only are they supported, but they have the tools they need, they have the technology they need, and they have the mental health help they need. And they will always know that a Dixon administration has their back. We will never defund the police.
Dixon, the administration have their back.
My opponent is long on rhetoric and short on facts, and that's okay. I got to tell you, as a
Did
former
that count as profanity?
I have sat with our law enforcement. I have worked arm in arm with them. And that's why the budgets that I have written have been focused on supporting. I can tell you as governor, I've made too many phone calls to grieving families who've lost their loved ones on the front line. I've attended too many funerals and visitations. And that's why we've got to talk about gun violence. My opponent's proposing policies that increase guns, decrease oversight, and eliminate gun-free zones. That's not going to make us any safer. Here's what will. I delivered a bipartisan investment in our law enforcement, $1 billion for training, for recruiting, for making sure that we're shoring up pensions for those who risk their lives for all of us every day. Every one of us deserves to feel safe in our home and in our communities. Investing in law enforcement is what we have done and what we need to continue to do to keep people safe.
Mrs. Dixon, 30 seconds.
It must be so embarrassing for the governor that it's actually on tape that she said she supports the spirit of defund the police. That's the truth. I'm not short on facts. In fact, when she didn't get her gas tax increase, she decided to then veto funding for our road patrols. Now she's coming out and saying she's bipartisan and she's supporting the police, but her record shows something terribly different. In fact, that's why we've lost a cop a day in Detroit this year. It's devastating to see the chief executive officer treat our police officers this way.
Cop a day, based.
I know Mrs. Dixon is committed to her talking points, but the fact of the matter is just this week, with a group of Republican and Democratic legislators, I signed a bill to support our secondary road patrol. Just this week, I was endorsed by a different police organization and a number of prosecutors and sheriffs. They're split. You know why? They usually go to the Republican side, but they've seen me in action. They know we have made the biggest investment supporting them, and we will continue to do so long as I'm governor.
Candidates, I appreciate you doing a great job on time. This is flying by, so I'm trying to get to some more of these questions. And this one is for Detroit. Joe there says that he has some real concerns about racial bias in law enforcement. And this is important because we have seen so many cases around the country that have been really troubling. And here's what he says. He says racial bias exists in law enforcement in policing, charging, trials, sentencing, incarceration, prisoner abuse, probation, and parole. If you would please ask a question about criminal justice system racial bias reform in Michigan. First, Governor, do you agree with that assessment? Why or why not? And if you agree, what can you do about it?
Well, I think that we know there is always work to do to make sure that people who are policing communities are safe, they are supported, but they are also trained and that they are working with the community. That's something that's really important. I gotta tell you, one of the most joyful things I've attended over the last few years was an expungement fair in Flint with the sheriff and the prosecutor working with our attorney general and secretary of state to help people who've already served their time, who simply want a job and a fresh start to get back on that effort. That came about because of the work that our lieutenant governor has done with regard to improving our criminal justice system. There is more work to do. There is training. We ask too much of our law enforcement officers. We need to support them with mental health experts so that when they are in communities, everyone goes home at the end of the day.
Yeah, I don't think asking them not to
Dixon,
shoot
do you agree with
mentally
the
ill
assessment,
people is
in
too
that
much to
question?
ask.
And if you do, what do you do about it?
We need to always make sure that our police officers have the training that they need and the support that they need. What we're seeing in the state of Michigan is many of the communities that used to have police officers rise up out of them, and then they would become police officers in their own community, which is so important and so valuable to our local communities. They've stopped doing that because of this rhetoric of defund the police that you've heard across the country, because people have demonized our police officers and made this a career that people don't feel comfortable in anymore. In fact, our own governor marching with the people who are out there saying the police are bad have helped move this narrative along.
The police are bad.
It's hard for our police officers and it's hard for our community. I think not only do we need training in our police departments, but we also need to bring our police officers into our schools to make sure our young kids feel comfortable around our police officers.
Governor,
that's a bad reason, or that's a bad policy for a lot of reasons.
Is to keep her cool and to be a healer in chief. What Mrs. Dixon is referring to was a clergy-led moment of healing. We had police represented as well. It was an important community moment. What won't heal the divide is someone who makes a rush to judgment, like Mrs. Dixon did when the altercation and death of Patrick Leoya happened here in Grand Rapids. That won't fix problems. We need to support good cops. We got to make sure communities are safe. We can and must do both.
Mrs. Dixon?
As I've traveled around this state, I've had police officers tell me time and time again, too often, Governor Whitmer criminalizes the police and glorifies the criminal. She comes out on the side of the person who's trying to harm our cop. She is someone who does rush to judgment. This is a real problem when you have your police officers out there in the line of duty in danger every single day. She's right. I'm going to support our police officers. I will always have their back. I will always make sure that they know they are safe in this state.
Yes, to be honest, like the old adage about different races looking alike, I can barely tell these two women apart.
Guns that involve guns, and the question arises, how do you keep guns out of the hands of people that would do bad things with them? Given the recent U.S. Supreme Court ruling, the state's ability to make gun laws may be somewhat limited because of the Bruin decision, but no matter what, when you see firearms-related crimes, when you see gun violence, what, if anything, would you do to change Michigan's existing gun laws or create new ones, again, with the codicil about the Supreme Court? 60 seconds.
One of the biggest problems that we have in the state of Michigan is that we're letting people out too easily. People commit gun crimes, and then they're back out on the street. This is a problem for our police officers, too. They're afraid to even arrest these guys for fear they're just going to come back out and target them. And
I don't think cops are afraid to arrest people.
Across the state tell me
I don't think that's a problem in this country.
As soon as they're out on the job. This is catastrophic. We need to make sure we are tough on crime in this state. This idea that you're going to take guns away from law-abiding citizens and somehow that's going to keep them out of the hands of criminals, that's never going to work. We have to make sure that we are tough on crime. When we find someone who commits a gun crime, they need to be put away. This administration is trying to hide prison numbers from you. They're saying that the prisons are empty, that we don't have a crime problem. Our sheriffs across the state have told me they're hiding them in our jails and giving them lesser violations and then letting them back out on the streets. That's catastrophic.
Governor?
I'm a little confounded by what she just said. I don't know.
I think we all are.
I'll say this. As a former prosecutor, I take public safety very seriously. As a mom, I'm furious that in our country, guns are the #1 killer of our children. As a governor, I know we can and must act. I support secure storage. I support background checks. I support red flag laws. This is how we keep our communities safer. This is how we keep our kids safer when they're in school. My opponent supports constitutional carry, which means more guns, less oversight, less training. She wants to eliminate gun-free zones like at our schools. The work we have done has helped improve safety. There is more good work to do without question. But here's what we've done. With Operation Safe Neighborhoods, we've got parole sweeps. We're getting illegal guns off the streets. We're working with local police departments, and we will continue to do so and take any action we can to make our communities safer.
Mrs. Dixon, 30 seconds.
I don't think it can be any clearer. The governor's made her statement. She wants to take guns away from law-abiding citizens. She does not trust our law-abiding citizens with their guns. We know this. We've already
I don't
seen
trust most
agencies
citizens
trying to
with
do this
guns
on their own. And she doesn't even know that we're in a situation where our jails are filled with violent criminals that are beyond what our jails can handle. They're not putting them in our prisons. She doesn't even know what's happening in the criminal justice system in her own state.
Governor, we're going to go to you, but I'm going to ask the control room to, there we go, to reset that clock. That was distracting. My apologies. Governor, please, 30 seconds.
Sure. I mean, I'd be happy to give my 30 seconds to Mrs. Dixon if she wants to actually tell us what kind of supports she might, you know, what policies she might support to get guns off the street, to keep our communities safer. I still haven't heard that. I don't think that you've heard that. And I think every one of us deserves to know, what is the plan to get guns out of our communities?
I love Ninetales' joke about looking like the score is tied because the 8's on the podium.
Quicker, so I'm going to go with you real quickly, Governor. Let's talk a bit about the economy. We touched on it earlier a little bit, but one of the questions we heard was like this, and we heard it a lot, like this one from Paula in Grand Rapids.
I want to know, what are the candidates going to do with the high inflation if they're elected?
Paula, I appreciate the question, but I will...
Every other debate we've watched has either started with immigration or inflation. This is the first one to start with abortion. But it is two women debating. So
you might be able to do. Jane in Caledonia says, what's your position on removing the taxes and retirement pensions? This is a very hot topic, especially with...
Also, Hydra, good evening. I didn't say hey to you earlier.
I'm considering moving out of Michigan because of this. And Charles...
I made it my 10 minutes. Profanity again. Fuck yeah.
Economy, will you work to roll back the state's income tax to 3.9%? Governor, start with that or anything else that, as governor, you might be able to do.
There's a lot to cover there, so I'll start with this. You know, we know that inflation is hurting, whether it's the price of gas or it is the price of groceries. A governor cannot fix global inflation, but what we can do is help keep more money in your pocket. I worked with the Republican legislature to make sure that we leveled the financial barrier to higher education and skills so that people can get into good paying jobs. 170,000 people are in tuition-free programs now. We also expanded TriShare, which started here in Grand Rapids, by the way. The state picks up a third of the cost of daycare, the parent a third of the cost, and the employer a third of the cost. And for people who are really struggling, we have expanded for 150,000 kids in Michigan, daycare that is free or low of cost. We also put our fiscal house in order. And because of that, because of the upgrade in our credit rating and the money that we've put in the rainy day fund, we could repeal the retirement tax, which I do support. We could triple the earned income tax credit, which I also support, and a pause on the gas tax.
Mrs. Dixon, can you tell me what you think the governor could do? Because obviously it's a big problem.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting that they asked about the pension tax because the governor stood here 4 years ago and said that she would, that would be one of the first things that she would do, would be repeal the pension tax, and that hasn't happened in the 4 years that she's been governor. In fact, the other question was, would you try to get the income tax down to 3.9? The governor was actually offered 2 different reductions in the personal income tax to get money back in your pockets, but she vetoed both of those. It's not surprising. This governor has vetoed more bills than any governor for the past 70 years. So it's not surprising. She also had the opportunity to give you a gas tax holiday. And guess what? She vetoed that as well. In fact, Michigan right now has some of the highest gas tax in the nation. We have some of the highest gas prices in the nation. She hasn't come out and said she's going to give you a gas tax holiday now. If she had done it before, you wouldn't be suffering so badly now. Gretchen Whitmer wants you to pay more for gas to force you into electric vehicles.
30 seconds, go.
I don't even know how to respond to that. I'll just say this. You know, Mrs. Dixon's party has been in control.
You should say right-wingers are morons.
40 years. I know she hasn't lived in Michigan that long, but I'm not here to play games. When the legislature sends me a bill and tells you they've cut your taxes, but they know secretly none of it even goes into effect until 2023, I don't play those games. I veto those games. You deserve honesty. You deserve solutions. You deserve leaders who can work together and deliver for you and your family. That's what we've been doing.
When we talk about inflation, you should ask the governor where she stands on line 5 and your gas prices, because she has made it very clear that she wants to shut down line 5 and will do anything to do so. Even though Joe Biden says no, she's still trying to shut down line 5 today. Line 5 would raise the cost to heat your home. It would raise the price to fly out of our Detroit airport in a time we need economic development, and it would raise the cost of gas for your car. But she doesn't care about money in your pocket. She likes the political benefit.
Candidates, we've come to the final question in our debate. We will have enough time to complete it, but I need you to stay on time. 2019, the legislature passed, the governor signed reform of auto no-fault insurance. It came with a promise of lower premiums and choice in the coverage that you had. A $400 rebate from the Catastrophic Claims Association followed this spring. One of the consequences was a reduction in attendant care. That's for long-term health care for people who have been injured.
Don't forget, we're going to be watching the Mandela Barnes Ron Johnson debate on replay here in just about 10 minutes.
$45, which had a real impact, obviously, on families that depended on those. And Heather in Spring Lake wants to ask this.
I would like to know what each candidate is going to do about fixing the auto reform bill for the injured victims that were injured before the auto reform. My son was injured in 2014 and has been affected by the auto reform bill.
Mrs. Dixon, 60 seconds, please.
Well, as you said, there is a lawsuit in the courts right now, and we're seeing that they're saying that this was a contract that has to be upheld. And so that is very good news for the victims of this situation. But we probably need to talk to the legislature to see if we can go further. There's always bills where there's unintended consequences. We're losing a lot of our healthcare workers because of this. We have the opportunity to work with the legislature to see if there's something that we can do. The governor will tell you that she's the one that gave you those $400 checks. What she's not telling you is that she's also giving you the bill. You're going to end up paying $48 back for every vehicle because this was too fast. She knew that these victims were looking for compensation, but she still gave this out to try to buy your vote. That's what she's doing at the end of this election.
You don't like TikTok town hall, just wait until these debates start looking like Twitch debates.
The Republican Party controls both chambers of our legislature. We worked together because Michigan had high auto rates. Consumers wanted options, and so that legislation gave them options. And because of it, they've been able to save some money. They got a rebate. Also, we've got more people who are driving who are insured now because they can actually afford some of the options. Now, for people who were injured before that law was signed, they have a vested interest, and I believe that they deserve the care that they need. And so I am eager to work with the legislature. The Republican leaders in the legislature haven't come to the table yet, but I'll be a willing partner when they're ready to do that.
30 seconds.
This governor has proven time and time again that she actually won't come to the table. She keeps claiming to be bipartisan. I want to remind you that she has vetoed more bills than any governor in the last 70 years. So when she has sat up here and talked about her bipartisan willingness to work with people, do not be deceived. This is a woman who shut down the state and had to have her powers removed by the Supreme Court. Do not trust her with another 4 years to terrorize you.
Governor, 30 seconds.
Observable goat.
There are so many wonderful things that are happening in Michigan. There are certainly some challenges ahead. I will continue to work with anyone who wants to solve problems, not just score political points with rhetoric, but actually come to the table with alternatives. I've heard a lot of complaining and grievance tonight. What I haven't heard is alternative solutions. That's what I'm always going to stay focused on, and I'll work with anyone who brings that attitude and wants to solve problems regardless of what side of the aisle they come from.
Candidates, we have come to the end of the question part of our debate. I thank you all for addressing those issues and highlighting some differences between the two candidates. It's good.
This is live with the Michigan Gubernatorial debate.
Governor,
we're getting ready to watch a replay of the Mandela Barnes
Ron
Johnson debate.
This election is a choice about our future, and I will always welcome honest dialogue. I think what you heard from my opponent tonight is divisive rhetoric to pit us against each other for her own political gain. I don't have time for that. I don't think you do either. These are serious times that require leaders who can solve problems and work together to make your life a little bit better right now. I want to continue to move our state forward, to make Michigan a place that can attract young talent and keep them here, to make sure that women have the right to make their own decisions about their bodies and their health, to ensure that Michigan is a place where every person is respected and protected under the law. That's the Michigan I want for my children and for yours. We cannot trust our future to dangerous people who peddle conspiracy theories. to people for whom problems are more politically valuable than solutions, to people who think they only win if someone else is losing. We don't have time for that. This is a great state, and our future is bright, and I'll work hard every single day to make sure of it. I'm asking for your vote in this critical election. Thank you, and good night.
Mrs. Dixon, you have the final word.
The governor would like to forget how hard the last 4 years have been with Gretchen Whitmer. She's shown us who she is. She stood on this very stage and said she wouldn't raise taxes. And she tried and tried and tried again to raise your taxes over and over. She also said that she cares about women, but she would gladly put little boys in your daughter's locker room. She also said she cares about parents, but she hasn't stood for parents who have said, why do we have adults whispering sex and gender into the ears of our little kids? This governor's policies are
dog whistle transphobia there.
Destructive. Crime is up, jobs are down, schools are worse, and the roads didn't get fixed. That's what happens when you hire a radical career politician. You go in the wrong direction. Lansing needs common sense. We need to make sure we stop strangling our businesses and we help them to create jobs, we help them to increase salaries, and we help them to be prosperous. We need to tell our parents, we've got your back. We want you to have the final decision on what's happening in your child's education. And we need to make sure that we hire more cops, and they know we have their back, and we're gonna get out of their way and let them do their job. But most of all, I wanna make sure that we put money back into the pockets of our middle-class families. We need common sense, and when you lack it, that's all you can see. I hope to earn your vote and bring Michigan back to a family-friendly Michigan on November 8th.
Candidates both, I thank you very much for being here. I'm going to take
observable goat. It is because they look like kooks.
In election years, one of the
As a
most
conservative, it's getting harder and harder to not look like a kook.
Candidates together for debates for a lot of reasons. And it's not because candidates don't want to debate, but it's a huge investment of time. And there are a number of considerations that you have to take for your own candidacy. For reasons on both of your sides, it might have been easier not to do this tonight. I get that. So I appreciate the fact that you personally agree, but moreover, in working with your campaigns, that you were willing to compromise and or set aside some of the problems that we might have had in putting this together. So my personal thanks to you.
Like Carrie Lake and Katie Hobbs in
your campaigns to work with.
Arizona. Yeah, the 88.
One of the important things
it is Channel 8, Wood TV.
For the past hour, there have been no commercials. This isn't about.
We determined that the channel Wood TV kind of sounds like they live in sexual anarchy.
You live in sexual anarchy?
But it kind of seemed like they were appealing to white supremacists by having 88 on screen. For those of you who don't know, is HH. There are no more debates between Tudor Dixon and Gretchen Whitmer. This was the one and only gubernatorial debate in Michigan. We are going to take a commercial break, and we're going to come back, and we are going to watch the second Senate debate between Mandela Barnes and Ron Johnson in Wisconsin. What up, Garrett? The ads are just so I can get everything switched around. We'll take like a 3-minute break, and then we will be back with the Ron Johnson Mandela Barnes debate in the Wisconsin Senate race. So see you on the other side of the break, and then we're gonna do a quick rundown of the news afterwards.
Hi, I'm Justin FREAKIN. I'm a leftist broadcaster and comedian, not liberal, leftist. And despite what you may have heard from right-wing propaganda, George Soros isn't handing out Soros bucks and funding people like me. There are no Koch brothers, Mercers, or any number of right-wing think tanks funding content on the left side of the spectrum the way they fund people like Ben Shapiro, Dave Rubin, and Dennis Prager. And YouTube doesn't monetize videos that are controversial or deal with politics unless you're someone like Steven Crowder. So this is an ultimatum. Become a patron. Support my Patreon, or I'm going to become a right-winger and get some of that easy money. you know for a fact that I could be bigger than Charlie Kirk or Jesse Lee Peterson.
Amazing!
All I have to do is talk about how I used to be an SJW snowflake, but the left went too far with their cultural Marxism, and Republicans are stupid enough to buy it, even though this video exists. And you know I'm right, so give me your money or I'm selling you out.
We live in turbulent times. The media is full of deception, conspiracy theories, and fake news. Now, more than ever, it is important to ensure you're getting information from a source that's freaking reliable.
I'm Justin Mullins, and this is the Freakin' News.
Get a breaking or interesting story with a humorous twist in about a minute weekdays, 8 a.m. Eastern on YouTube, BitChute, Odyssey, and more.
Observable Goat, thank you for the sub. Greatly appreciate it. Here is your second meme of the day. Cat came to drink milk and fight, all out of milk. Look at his face. He's so determined. We ain't got time for the UK right now. I actually do have a story about Liz Truss and her troubles in the UK for later we might get to. But right now, it is the second Senate debate between Democrat Mandela Barnes, who is the current lieutenant governor in Wisconsin, debating Republican incumbent Ron Johnson, who might be the dumbest man in the Senate. This is the second and apparently the last debate between the two of them. This happened about an hour ago when we were watching it on replay. Here we go.
Tonight, the race for U.S. Senate. The two candidates take on the biggest issues facing Wisconsin: inflation, abortion, immigration. Democratic Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes.
If we're going to change Washington, we have to change the people we send to Washington.
And Republican Senator Ron Johnson.
Apparently, since the last debate, Johnson has opened up more of a lead. He was up like 1 point on Barnes.
620 WTMJ. Wiz Politics. The Milwaukee Business Journal. And Marquette University. Live from Marquette's Varsity Theater, here are your moderators, Charles Benson and Shannon Sims.
And good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight for Wisconsin U.S. Senate debate. We have a great audience here tonight at Marquette University's Varsity Theater.
So let's take some moments to just say thank you for those who are joining us. That means you can clap. As you can see, we have a full house tonight. Now, this debate is being broadcast from Subpoena.
They've given him instructions not to clap during the debate.
We also are welcoming a national audience with C-SPAN watching.
So let's go over the rules agreed to by both candidates. Each candidate will have 60
welcoming a
seconds
national audience with the Troll Patrol watching.
Candidates will have 60 seconds to answer a question and 30 seconds for any possible follow-up question from us, that is. If a candidate runs over time,
he said muff.
This is what you will hear.
You live in sexual anarchy?
If an opponent refers to another candidate in their answer, the candidate will get 30 seconds for a rebuttal, and each candidate will have a one-time 60-second rebuttal. So, we begin with opening statements, and we drew names to determine who will go first. Mr. Johnson, you will get 1 minute, and you get to go first.
Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Charles. I'd first like to thank WTMJ and Marquette University for hosting this debate. This election offers a very clear choice. I have a lifetime experience raising a family, building a business, creating good-paying manufacturing jobs right here in Wisconsin. I've worked hard all my life. I began my tax-paying career at the age of 15 as a dishwasher at a Walgreens grill. I worked full-time paying my way through college. I worked all shifts starting my business. As your U.S. Senator, my tax cuts for more than 20 million tax filers help small businesses compete with the big guys and survive the pandemic. My right to try law is saving lives, and my Joseph Project has transformed lives by helping people to get really good paying jobs. In stark contrast,
here he goes talking about his
work
nonprofit that I find questionable.
Left-wing rhetoric, I'm not sure what he's ever accomplished or really what he has to offer, but I'm looking forward to the debate.
Thank you. Mr. Barnes, you now have 1 minute for your opening statement.
Well, thank you so much, TMJ4, for hosting this debate. I want to thank everybody for showing up today. As you know, my story is a Wisconsin story, only possible here, being raised in a union household with my father, who worked third shift on an assembly line, and my mother being a public school teacher. Those jobs were the ticket to the middle class, but unfortunately, those tickets are in short supply. They're harder and harder to come by. And that task has been made increasingly more difficult because of out-of-touch politicians like Senator Ron Johnson, who continues to leave working people behind. I can tell you, if you aren't one of his wealthy donors, can't count on him to support you. But if you are a working person, a person who's been looking for a little bit of relief, it's a shame that we've had our backs, or had politicians who would rather turn their backs on us in service of their wealthy donors or their own self-interest. But I'm running for the U.S. Senate because I believe that better is possible. I believe that we can create in America a Wisconsin that gives everybody a fair shot at the American dream. That's the difference. Now, Ron Johnson's going to try to run and hide from his record, but he can't hide from the truth.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Our first question is about all of those. Our first question is about all those campaign commercials. Don't worry, we're not going to show any of them.
But according to our partners at WisPolitics, the Republican-aligned Senate Leadership Fund has spent or has reserved $24 million in ads to defeat Mr. Barnes. Many of those trying to portray you as soft on fighting crime, with comments about bloated police budgets and ending cash bail. How do you respond to voters who question your record when it comes to police funding and reducing crime, Mr. Barnes?
Well, thank you so much, and I'm really glad you brought up the obscene amount of spending in this race. And then notice how you said that the money is being spent to defeat me. There's no commercials talking about Senator Johnson's record because he has nothing to run on. He hasn't done a single thing for us. He's had 12 years to show up for working Wisconsinites. He has refused to every single day. Now, with that being said, on the topic of crime, this is something that has impacted me personally more times than I care to count. I'm a proud product of the city of Milwaukee, and I've taken the good with the bad. And I have unfortunately lost more friends than I care to count to gun violence. So it is absurd when people say that I'm soft on crime or I'm not serious about issues, because there's nothing I'm more deeply passionate about. I hope nobody ever has to feel that pain. This is about making sure that law enforcement and communities have strong relationships. This is also about making sure we do the things that we know prevent crime from happening in the first place, investing in good schools and good paying jobs, and doing the work to get rid of poverty. We know when communities have resources to thrive, they don't experience violence in the way that other communities do.
Mr. Barnes.
He did bring up your name,
that buzzer sounds like the buzzer to change classes at my high school, and it's giving me PTSD.
But we do know he got a degree in communications, specializing in performance. So he's a performer, he's an actor. And I don't know that he's just delivering lines somebody wrote for him, or that
Like
he's making
Ronald Reagan.
up on his own. But falsehoods just seem to roll up his tongue. So I suggest anybody watching this debate or the campaign take anything Mr. Barnes says with a huge grain of salt.
Well,
Go ahead.
I would absolutely like to respond to that because, well,
Go ahead.
Now, don't cheer during the debate.
the senator is going to try to run and distract from his record. He can't run from the fact that when there was an opportunity for him to provide support for public safety initiatives, he walked away. The American Rescue Plan allowed our administration to invest $100 million into law enforcement, public safety, and crime prevention initiatives. Ron Johnson voted against it because he would rather play politics. And look, the biggest achievement in business was Ron Johnson saying, "I do." He married into his business. He didn't start that.
All right. Again, we'll get to ping pong here, but
Plus you went over 30 seconds.
Yes, yeah. So 30 seconds.
First of all, I'm proud of my accomplishments. You know, there aren't many senators can say they got tax cuts for 20 million businesses, or that they produced a law, Rights Try, that saved lives, or that they started up a program called the Joseph Project in the inner city that has provided hundreds of jobs and transformed lives. I'm proud of those accomplishments. What Lieutenant Governor Barnes has is no accomplishments whatsoever.
Please.
All he has are lies and distortions, because you can't run the record of 40-year high inflation, record gas prices.
And we're going to get to some of these topics. So let me ask you the question that was also that came up under campaign ads. WisPolitics reporting that the Democratic-aligned Senate Majority PAC has spent nearly $19 million in ads to defeat you. Many of those ads trying to portray you as an out-of-touch guy with a tax cut you initiated that greatly benefited you and your rich donors. So, should voters be skeptical of your record when it comes to working families?
No, again, I come from a working background. As I described, I got my first tax-paying job at the age of 15 as a dishwasher in Walgreens Grill. You know, I work shift work. You know, I know that others have said their fathers worked for third shift, but I actually work third shift. And so the fact of the matter is this grotesque level of money is spending. It is grotesque, but they spent, I think, more than $9 million against me before I even decided to run. So Democrats love to denigrate dark money until they use it themselves, and I think in this race, Democrats have spent more in this race, but it's a grotesque amount of spending. I'm not going to defend it.
All right, let's move on to inflation and Social Security and other issues. Today we learned that inflation continues to run hot, and it remains the #1 concern for voters in the Marquette Law School poll. Mr. Johnson, you will get the first question. The federal policy has been to drive up interest rates, which hurts everyone, to drive down inflation. So what can Congress do to control the rising costs when it comes to housing, rent, gas, and food?
Cat, thank you for being a freaking follower.
In the Senate to help Wisconsin families.
Well, you have to understand what caused these 40-year high inflation rates. It's out of control deficit spending. I voted against most of it. But unfortunately, President Biden, when he came into office, put forward another $1.9 trillion COVID relief package when we had $1.25 trillion left unspent from the previous COVID relief packages. I was warning about stagflation early in 2021. So the solution is stop the deficit spending, stop growing our debt. But understand that a dollar you held at the start of the Biden administration is now worth only 88.3 cents. It's crushing everyone, but it's particularly crushing seniors on a fixed income.
So let me just follow up on that, because you just can't stop government spending today.
If anybody is sus, it's Ron Johnson.
And I voted no on these deficit spending. Lieutenant Governor Barnes supports all this massive deficit spending, including $369 billion on the Green New Deal energy boondoggles we can't afford to pay for.
So would you do anything, though, in housing, rent, gas to drive down those costs? You'll have 30
Well, again,
seconds.
you have to grow our economy, but stop the deficit spending and become energy independent. Stop the war on fossil fuel.
All right. You do have a chance to rebut because he did bring your name up.
I'll wait for my full response.
Okay, well, Mr. Barnes, the same question to you. What can Congress do to control rising costs for housing, rent, gas, and food? And what will be your priority in the Senate to help Wisconsin families?
Thank you so much. Now, I have experienced, again, the best and the worst of things. I know what it's like to struggle to pay the bills, to wonder if you'll make ends meet and how you're going to get by the next day. That's an experience far too many people in this state, far too many people across this country have to live with on a daily basis. So I know firsthand what we need to do is lower costs for working families. We need to give working class families some relief. With the middle class tax cut, we need to make the child tax credit permanent. We got to stop giving tax deductions and tax breaks for the wealthiest people. The 2017 tax plan that Senator Johnson was a no vote for at first until he orchestrated $215 million in tax deductions to his biggest donors, benefited himself personally and his own company while leaving working class people behind. We need to make sure working class people get to keep more of what they earn. He has no problem blowing a $2 trillion hole in the deficit by voting for the 2017 tax bill that benefited corporations and the most wealthy Americans. And on top of that, we have to create jobs right here in Wisconsin, the same kind of jobs Senator Johnson doesn't mind sending out of state or out of the country.
Senator Johnson, you have 30 seconds to respond to that.
I fully understand how high the cost of gas is because I fill up my own gas tank. I drive myself around the state, unlike Lieutenant Governor Barnes, who is chauffeured around by State Patrol, costing taxpayers over $600,000. Through last November, he used them 13 and a half hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. That's not only excessive, it's abuse of the taxpayer money. So you ought to take a look at his record, but I actually understand that's causing the cost of gas to go up, and it's the Democrat war on fossil fuel.
Thank you.
Mr. Barnes, you can have a rebuttal there.
The crowd's just getting unruly now.
The senator should be so audacious. He fails to mention that taxpayers had to foot the bill for his private plane trips between D.C. and his $3 million mansion in Florida, the vacation home. The 2017 tax plan also gave tax benefits for people who make private plane purchases. Guess who bought a few private planes right after the 2017 tax bill was signed? Senator Johnson's family. We're paying for that. Working class families are footing the bill for millionaire lifestyles, and it needs to stop.
Mr. Johnson, you would have a chance. You also have a 6-second rebuttal if you want to use it.
So that is a total lie. I never was reimbursed for any private jet travel. What I was reimbursed for was actually approved by the Senate Rules and Ethics Committee when I submitted the expense. My children spend some time in Florida. My wife goes down there. I visit them a few weekends. I didn't charge for the plane trip down, but it's within Senate rules to charge for the plane trip back. We're talking maybe $5,000 versus the $600,000 it cost Wisconsin taxpayers for his 13 and a half hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. That is abuse of the taxpayer funds.
All right, let's...
Did you want to respond to the security?
I just want a clarification that it's okay when he does it, but not with anybody else.
All right, we'll move on to our next question.
Let's move on and continue this conversation. Inflation's still the concern, but let's talk about wages. Massachusetts Institute of Technology's living wage calendar shows a single adult in Wisconsin would need to make $16.40 an hour to meet their basic needs and to be self-sufficient. That bumps up to $18.36 an hour, for a working couple with one child. Mr. Johnson, do you think that the government or the marketplace should set the standard for a minimum wage, and what should that wage be?
No, I think government screws up more things, causes more problems, or exacerbates more than they actually solve. The individuals working at minimum wage are a very small percentage. Most people looking for jobs right now are probably getting $12, $13, $14, or $15 an hour starting wage. That's what you get with a robust economy. The problem people are having is the out-of-control inflation caused by out-of-control deficit spending, our growing debt, and Democrats' war on fossil fuel. Again, a dollar you had at the start of the Biden administration is only worth 88.3 cents. We have to get deficit spending out of control, and we'll never get it under control with Democrats in power.
Thank you. And also, can I please ask the audience to refrain from making comments? Now, Mr. Barnes, the same question to you. Do you need me to repeat the statistics?
No, thank you. I think that what's going on right now with working people being denied the fair shot that they deserve is absolutely abhorrent. Working people shouldn't work 40 hours a week and still have to struggle to pay the bills. If you work full-time, you shouldn't have to worry about if you're going to make rent. Minimum wage has not gone up since 2009. In Wisconsin, our minimum wage is still the federal minimum wage of $7.25. It is shameful. Since 2014, we've been supporting a $15 minimum wage. And for one of the most wealthy members of Congress to sit and say that Congress shouldn't set a standard of living and raising the minimum wage is the frustration that so many people have in this country. It's why people are tuned out of politics, because they feel like nobody's looking out for them. And that's because Ron Johnson is in the United States Senate not looking out for us. The reality is he talked about a small percentage of minimum wage earners. It's even a smaller percentage of millionaires and billionaires in this country who he has no problem looking out for every single time.
Mr. Johnson, do you want to respond?
So again, Mr. Barnes claims to be part of the working class, but I haven't really found evidence that he actually had a real job in the private sector. Maybe he had some, but he certainly doesn't talk about it. So I've worked in the private sector for over 40 years. Again, I've worked shift work. Started with very humble beginnings. I know exactly what people are struggling with. I've worked really hard to make sure that our economy can grow so we have great opportunities. Again, look at my Joseph Project. We have transformed lives of people by giving them the dignity of earning their own success. I know exactly what it takes to create jobs. He doesn't have a clue.
Well,
thank you, Mr.
I can tell you that that's the worst part about it. If you have had humble beginnings and you've made it in life, for you to turn your back on everybody else, that's what people are frustrated with. That's what I'm frustrated with. We need people who are going to go to the mat to fight for working people, to improve quality of life. When we had a chance at 1,000 good-paying union jobs with Oshkosh Defense, and they decided they wanted to move the jobs to South Carolina, Senator Johnson's response was, we have enough jobs. We're talking about not just 1,000 jobs, but 1,000 opportunities for families to get ahead. He's praised offshoring, saying that it makes sense. So when you're
Lindsey Graham thanked him.
Know that it's a policy championed by Senator Johnson.
He did bring up another issue. So
Yes, has the lieutenant governor ever created a job? I've created hundreds of jobs. Through my Joseph Project, we have transformed the lives of hundreds of people and positively impacted the lives of thousands of people. Again, these are people in the inner city, formerly incarcerated people with drug and alcohol abuse. I've been doing this for 7 or 8 years. It's the most heartwarming thing I've done. How can you say I've turned my back on people? I haven't turned my back at all. I've done everything I could to provide good-paying jobs for so many people. He does not have a clue how.
All right, we want to move on to another topic here, so we will move on. And we're going to try to get back on order here on who goes first. This next question is about Social Security, and it will go to Mr. Johnson. You will have the first question on this. Inflation also hits our seniors, and they learned today they will be getting a nearly 9% cost of living increase because of inflation. Now, there are nearly 1.3 million people in Wisconsin on Social Security. That's 1 in 5 Wisconsinites. The average person receives about $19,000 a year. So, Mr. Johnson, President Biden called you out specifically on Social Security, saying you want to put it on the chopping block every year. But you've also said yearly evaluations can fix programs that are broken. So what specific options do you support to fix Social Security?
Again, let me be very clear. I want to save Social Security. I want to save Medicare. The greatest threat to any government program is the massive, out-of-control deficit spending and our growing debt. If we just return to the interest rate that we experienced in the last 3 decades of the last century, 5.4%, that would add $1.2 trillion per year to our interest expense, which would have to be paid without us defaulting and driving interest rates even higher. You know, yes, Social Security recipients are going to get an 8.7% raise, but that only keeps them equal with what they lost because of Biden's inflation. Again, a dollar you held, let's put it another way, a $100,000 nest egg that a senior had is now only worth $88,300. That is the federal government through their inflation, Democrats' inflation, basically taking $12,000 out of that senior's account. So again, the solution is reducing deficit spending, bringing down inflation, ending our war on fossil fuels so we don't keep driving up the cost of energy and gas.
Let me just follow up on that quickly. So nothing on payroll tax, nothing on changing, raising the retirement age, any of those other options?
No, the first table stakes is stop inflation. You have to do that first, and then grow our economy. The number one component of the solution to all these problems is growing our economy. Under Biden, we've just had 2 quarters of negative growth because they don't have a clue how to run an economy, and they are continuing to deficit spend.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Barnes, you have suggested the very wealthy should pay their fair share to help keep Social Security solvent for future generations. Define the very wealthy. Who will be paying more under your plan? And would you support lowering benefits for higher earners or raising the retirement age for the generations or younger?
Thank you so much. When I think about Social Security, I think about my grandparents, I think about my parents and other folks who worked hard their entire lives, who paid into a system, who deserve to see the benefit that they have justly earned. And when Senator Johnson talks about making Social Security discretionary spending, that means he's coming for your retirement. And it's odd that you can make the argument about inflation and how costs are increasing, but not support raising the minimum wage. And it's also a shame that instead of making sure the wealthy pay their fair share, you'd rather give them tax deductions, because that's not only how we make Social Security solvent, it's how we strengthen Social Security, making sure that the wealthy pay into this vital program. Now, under my plan, a person making under $400,000 would not see an increase in taxes. And Senator Johnson is going to, again, continue to complain about the deficit, but had no problem adding $2 trillion to the deficit to appease his wealthy donors and himself.
Okay, Mr. Johnson, you heard your name. You have 30 seconds.
So I never said I wanted to cut or put Social Security on a chopping block. What I said is we have to look at all of government spending and start prioritizing. Social Security, Medicare, defense spending would be at the top of the priority. What we can't afford to spend money on, for example, is $369 billion on the Green New Deal energy boondoggles, which would be corporate welfare. It will be completely wasted. It'll add to inflation and will put at risk Social Security benefits. But that's what the Lieutenant Governor is in favor of.
All right, we are going to.
Did you want to respond to that on the...
absolutely. The senator is
talking about the Inflation Reduction Act.
Say it again?
And he's also talking about the Inflation Reduction.
Right. So the senator's going all over the place with this. By making Social Security discretionary spending, it will be up to the whims of politicians every year under his plan. Doing it every 5 years as well. Social Security is supposed to...
Dante, we are not live. It happened about an hour ago.
You're supposed to see the benefit from that hard work. And that's what I find so hard to understand that Senator Johnson is opposed to. And he's going to bring up every other issue. He's going to talk about...
Thank you for the sub, the resub, Mergen.
He's bought and paid for by the fossil fuel industry. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in campaigns.
All right, we've gone back and forth.
Of course he's going to say fossil fuels are the way forward in the future.
What Lieutenant Governor Barnes is ignoring is that by 2033 to 2035, the Social Security Trust Fund runs out. At that point in time, benefits are already exceeding the amount of revenue coming in. At that point, benefits would be reduced to the amount of revenue coming in. So the question is, will we have the financial wherewithal to plus up benefits to honor those promises? That's what I'm trying to save. But if we continue to spend money on these green energy boondoggles, we won't have the financial wherewithal, and it'll be difficult to honor those promises. It's pretty
Mr.
basic.
Johnson,
He does not understand.
we will move on, but the question was again, how to make it solvent. How to make it solvent. But we will move on.
You have to grow your economy.
We will move on.
Lift the cap.
Now we will talk about gun violence. And this question will go to both of you, as well as police reform. On Monday night, a 12-year-old girl was shot and killed in Milwaukee while simply helping her mother to bring groceries into her home. Olivia Schultz's murder now raises the number of children killed in Milwaukee County to 20 so far this year. Olivia's mother tells us she feels she is living in a war zone and doesn't want to carry a gun to protect her family. Her neighbor said he just purchased a gun to protect his children because of gun violence. My question to you, what would you say to that parent? Mr. Barnes, you go first.
Well, I mentioned my own personal experiences with gun violence, and the sad reality is that these are not unique stories. They are happening every day in communities all across the country. The even sadder reality is we have politicians who say that there's nothing that can be done, and it's because they choose to do nothing. I'm talking about the politicians that are bought and paid for by the gun lobby. Senator Johnson has received $1.2 million in campaign support from the NRA, from the gun lobby. Of course he's going to say there's nothing that can be done. He's bought and paid for. He is in their pockets.
Tomorrow night, by the way.
Put their interests before the lives of our children. Now, I'm not making any assumptions. I don't know if he's ever had to deal with this before. I'm not sure if he's ever had to go to a funeral of a child.
Earl Grey.
Or the family of a child that was taken because of gun violence. But it's a pain I hope he never has to experience. It's a pain I hope nobody ever has to experience. But if we do the right thing, what a majority of people in the state of Wisconsin support, what a majority of gun owners support, background checks, that is easy. That is the easiest thing we could do. It is the
Mr.
lowest
Barnes, your
bar
time
possible.
is up.
But
Mr. Barnes, your
like Senator Johnson
time
would rather
is
put
up.
the gun lobby before us.
Mr.
Right,
Barnes,
you
your
get a chance
time
on
is
this
up.
same question, so you can respond right now. How, what would you say to those parents, and how can the Senate reduce gun violence?
Well, obviously, I'd express my sincere sympathy first. I would talk about the overall macro solution, which is renewed faith, stronger families, and more supportive communities. But then you start drilling down, one thing you have to do is you have to keep violent criminals in jail, and you have to support law enforcement. Now, unfortunately, we have an administration in Wisconsin right now that their goal was to reduce the prison population by 50%. They reduced it 15%, including paroling 884 criminals. 784 were violent, including 44 child rapists, 270 criminals who either committed or at least attempted murder. So keep violent criminals in jail. One of the things you use is cash bail, and there's an effort here to eliminate cash bail. But also we have to support law enforcement. You don't go on Russian Today TV and denounce law enforcement.
So let me follow up on that, because you're talking about a state issue here with the parole system, and
Yes.
under Republican governors and under Democratic governors, offenders have been released under the old parole system. You also supported in the Senate the first step, which allowed federal prisoners to be released or earn the option of early release. So do you not think people should have the option to be released early under the system of parole?
Sure. And my Joseph Project offers a second chance by providing formerly incarcerated individuals opportunities to turn their life around. So we all believe in redemption.
I'm sure it's exploiting them in some way.
He eliminated the disparity between crack and powder cocaine. I had a real concern, and that's why we asked for strict monitoring of who would be released to see if people commit further crimes. But what the Evers-Barnes administration did is they let people out on bail that horrific crimes.
Mr. Barnes?
Exactly. So it feels like the senator is trying to walk away from his record. Once again, he is bemoaning me for, the acts of the administration. But at the same time, the First Step Act released 2,000 to 3,000 people on parole early. So do you walk away from that? Do you not claim credit for that, for the release of 2,000 to 3,000 people, while at the same time attacking me for it?
You can respond if you want.
Again,
I know you referred to it already. Please, audience, if the audience could please hold on.
What I've seen are the violent criminals your administration released. I had concern about releasing, and we should be getting a report in terms of who was released, but we were told it was going to be very non-violent, people who've completely rehabilitated themselves. That's not who released here in Wisconsin.
This is the hypocrisy. He is attacking me for the same thing that he is doing.
All right, we move on.
Now to... we're going to talk about police reform. Sorry about that. Democrats support the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, while Republicans have backed the Justice Act. Both call for police reform and transparency. Mr. Johnson, what would you support, and would that include ending qualified immunity for police officers?
Yes, we should keep qualified immunity. That'd be a real assault on law enforcement. Senator Tim Scott was negotiating for police reform, and he had a very strong bipartisan bill, talked about providing federal funds for training so that law enforcement can understand what works and what doesn't work. But unfortunately, Democrats played politics with that, and as they've done in so many past occasions, it was either their way or the highway. So there's a strong bipartisan bill negotiated by Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina. They could have had it, we could have passed it, it could have been improving things, but Democrats said no. It's either our way or the highway, but that's happened on gun control, that's happened on so many different issues. Democrats love to play politics, they love issues, they'd rather have an issue than actually solve a problem.
I'd like to follow that up, Mr. Johnson. After examining both the George Floyd Justice Act and the Justice Act that you just spoke about, there are more similar goals than opposing ones. So is it a deal breaker to not get this on the floor if ending qualified immunity for police officers is in the bill?
Again, I would not support eliminating qualified immunity. I think that'd be a real attack on law enforcement, and I try and support law enforcement. If you want to reduce crimes, my opponent says that police officers don't commit crimes. Are you kidding me? You have a police presence somewhere and crimes aren't committed. It's not a guarantee, but we need law enforcement. And the problem with the whole defund movement, which he's been a big supporter of, It dispirits law enforcement. They're having a hard time recruiting members, and we aren't going to have the law enforcement officers we're going to need to reduce crime.
All right, I want to remind the audience again to please hold off because we want to get to more questions. He does bring you up in his, so I want to give you a chance for a rebuttal, and we all also are going to ask you this question.
Yep,
on the defund police is what he brought up.
No police officers in this country were more dispirited than the ones who were present at the United States Capitol on January 6th.
Please hold off on that. Audience, please.
I'm sorry.
I'm trying to tell the audience, please, so go ahead.
140 officers injured, one crushed.
He's sorry, he's so popular.
Another hit in the head with a fire extinguisher, another stab with a metal stake. So this talk about support for law enforcement, it's not real. It's not true, because he decided to play politics when the person he didn't want to win the presidential election.
You're right there. You have to end it.
And he did bring you up again. We'll still get you to that question, Mr. Barnes.
And I immediately and forcefully and repeatedly condemned the violence on January 6th, unlike my opponent, who basically just ignores the 570 riots, the 2,000 law enforcement officers injured during the summer riots, and he incited the Kenosha riots. The night after the first riot, Lieutenant Governor Barnes held a press conference and said it sure looked like it was a vendetta.
He incited them.
Carried out against a member of the community. Rather than providing the manpower, he incited 2 more nights of riots. That's a pretty miserable record when it comes to
Mr. Barnes, you have every right to respond to that.
Exactly. It has to be said that he called those folks patriots. He called them tourists. The people who were beating up police officers in the United States Capitol, the people that were there to protect him. He said he wasn't afraid. He said if they were Black Lives Matter or Antifa, he may have been afraid. But because they were the people who he riled up, of course he wasn't afraid.
All right, now the question to Mr. Barnes.
Specifically, Ron Johnson. Ron Johnson was involved in the plot.
He gets the question on the George Floyd Act or the Justice Act. What would you support, and does that have to include qualified
immunity?
Well, the most important thing we need to do is build trust, restore trust between law enforcement and the communities they serve. It's easy. It makes law enforcement easier. It makes the job easier. It results in less stress. Also results in less crime. Even in 2020, at the height of the protests, former Governor Scott Walker called for police reform. I do support getting rid of qualified immunity, and we need to hold bad actors accountable. We shouldn't let people who break the law, who were hired to enforce the law, go to a different department if they break the rules. Again, we can't have safer communities unless we have trust. And our administration, like I said before, invested historic sums of money in law enforcement, public safety, and crime prevention initiatives because we want to do the right thing to keep people safe on both ends. When we reduce poverty, we reduce crime. When we increase support for our schools, we reduce crime. When we create good paying jobs in communities, we reduce crime. Senator Johnson just doesn't seem to understand that.
All right, we will move on to the next topic here, and I ask the audience to please hold off so we can get to more questions here. The next set of questions will pertain to abortion and family planning. Democratic voters in the state say that that is their most important issue in the most recent Marquette poll.
Mr. Barnes, you have supported going back to Roe when it comes to abortions, but you have also said, quote, you can't legislate a specific timeline and it should be left up to a medical doctor. Can you clearly state at what point do you think life should be protected and what exemptions would you support?
Well, thank you so much. I have someone in the audience, Connie, who was expecting, and it was the most joyous time for her, but that joy was short-lived. What she thought were twins was actually a cancerous tumor forming. She had some very difficult conversations she never expected to have. And she had an abortion. That was her choice to make. In Ron Johnson's America, women don't get to make the best choice for their health. Rape victims don't get to make the best health care or don't get to make the choices for themselves. That's the unfortunate reality. I support us going back to Roe versus Wade. That was a law of the land that worked for 50 years. And Roe also allowed for some restrictions, but the reality is it has strong protections for the health and the life of the mother. And that's what we should be moving towards. Senator Johnson has sponsored 8 different national abortion bans. He sponsored abortion bans that had no exceptions for rape, incest, or the life of the mother. And that position is too out of touch and extreme.
Well, since you're here.
So, Mr. Johnson, the question is for you as well, so I'll give you a chance to respond.
I had it backwards.
How would you clearly state where you will protect life along this?
First, go to wisfacts.com, and you can read everything I've written on this particular subject. As Justice Alito said, this is a profound moral issue. And what I propose is probably, from my standpoint, the best way we can finally come after 50 years. This wasn't solved 50 years ago. This has been a divisive issue for 50 years. I proposed a one-time, single-issue referendum to decide at what point does society have the responsibility to protect life, balancing the rights of a mother with the rights of an unborn child. I can't think of a better way of solving this problem once and for all where most people would accept the results. In that scenario, I would have one vote. But the extreme position when it comes to abortion is the one that the Lieutenant Governor holds, which would allow abortions up to the moment of birth.
Every single Republican has said that.
So again, I propose something very reasonable. It's on wisfacts.com. Take a look at it. It needs to be occur after thoughtful, thorough, and a
Mr.
compassionate discussion.
Mr. Johnson, I wanted to ask you a question. You said the referendum, but a Republican-led legislature gavelled in and gavelled out so that referendum couldn't even be put on the table.
Audience, please.
So I'm disputing what that vote, or what the gavelled in and out. Governor Evers proposed a referendum to basically codify Roe v. Wade. That's not what I'm talking about. And if I do get reelected, and we do have a Republican governor, I will use all my influence to try and convince the legislature and the governor to hold that single issue, one-time referendum after a thoughtful, thorough, compassionate discussion where we examine all the information that, quite honestly, we haven't really looked at and educated ourselves about.
All right, Mr. Barnes, he did bring you up.
So when it comes to the topic of abortion, which is an issue that should be left between a woman and her doctor, Senator Johnson cites his personal beliefs. And I respect everyone's personal beliefs. I just don't think that everyone's personal beliefs should be the law for everyone. And 70% of people in this state support Roe versus Wade being the law of the land. His position is too out of touch. So he can try to fearmonger, use all these things talking about abortion up until birth, which just doesn't make sense. I think we can all agree that late-term abortion is happening in extreme circumstances.
Moving on.
He accused me of fear-mongering.
Okay.
I'm not trying to scare anybody. I'm not. I'm trying to develop a method where we can come together, decide this once and for all, compassionately, understanding we have a broad spectrum opinion, and have we the people decide. What could be more reasonable than that?
All right, we do want to get on to some other topics, including...
Mr. Barnes, Mr. Johnson, please.
It's very difficult to hear the question.
Okay, I will try to speak up. Thank you. This question is for you, Mr. Johnson. A federal family paid leave bill has been introduced but has failed to pass the Senate in 2013, 2015, 2017, 2019,
Johnson roasting on an open fire.
2021. What would it take to get you to consider 6 to 12 weeks of paid time off for a mother to recover from childbirth, or even a father and a mother to bond with their child?
Well, again, I realize that benefits are really popular, and spending money we don't have and mortgaging our kids' future is pretty popular. But the fact is we don't have the money for this. And if you force it on the private sector, you will start reducing jobs. You could put businesses out of work. We have a very tight labor supply right now. Companies that can afford it, because they're having to compete for workers, are offering paid family leave. Let the marketplace determine it. We have enough government regulations, enough government mandates. It screws things up. It makes problems.
No one ever says we don't have enough government regulation. I believe we don't have enough. Businesses have too much power.
I want to get through all of the questions here, so you'll have plenty of time at the end to applaud your team. Let's move on and get through these questions. Mr. Barnes.
Well, absolutely. Whether it's maternal or paternal leave, or the fact that people need to take care of a loved one sometimes. Over this pandemic, at the height of the pandemic, people were afraid to take off work because they were afraid they're going to lose their jobs, which made everybody at risk. It put people at risk who didn't have to be because they thought they were going to lose their jobs. Now, we're one of the only developed countries in the world with this lackluster paid leave policy that we have. We should absolutely strengthen it. From Senator Johnson's perspective, which is probably one of the most clear contrasts on this stage, is that it's always about the profits of businesses and corporations, but it's never about working people. If working people aren't healthy, if working people don't have the support that they need, then how can any business be productive? This is actually a good business decision to implement a paid leave policy in this country.
Mr. Johnson, you can respond to that
Lieutenant
specifically.
Governor Barnes has never created a job. He's never signed the front of a paycheck. He doesn't have a clue how to create jobs. He certainly doesn't have a clue how the economy works and how you run a business. He doesn't understand the struggles of small business people just trying to meet payroll, just trying to keep people employed. So he's happy to grow government and impose government mandates on small businesses, but he will drive them out of business. I'm trying to protect small businesses.
And so we will move. You'll get a rebuttal here. Yep.
Senator Johnson is taking a whole lot of credit for his business in law.
All right, we will move on to immigration, and that is our next topic.
Great line.
The first question will go to Mr. Barnes. We are seeing record number of encounters at the border with many seeking asylum. How would you work across the aisle to specifically reduce the crisis at the border and reform the process to legal citizenship through the green card system?
We got a Socrates.
Well, I support comprehensive immigration reform. It's quite simple. I support a path to citizenship for dreamers and their families, a system that treats people with respect and dignity and doesn't subject our children to the horrors of family separation. Now, I've had a chance to travel this entire state as lieutenant governor.
I thought he said horrors there for a minute. The horrors.
We don't have comprehensive immigration reform in this country. It makes it harder for small businesses. It makes it harder for our farmers. Everywhere I go, people can agree that a path to citizenship isn't just the humane thing to do, it's also good for our economy. Now, we have people like Senator Johnson who spent 12 years in office. All he'll do is complain. When he gets a chance to make his statement, I guarantee you it'll be a complaint. It won't be about a single thing that he's done to fix the immigration issues in this country. Now, we can do this. We can keep the border safe. We can treat people with dignity, but only if we have people who are serious about doing the work.
Mr. Johnson, you have this question as well.
Well, as Chairman of the Homeland Security Government Affairs Committee, I held probably 36 hearings on some aspects of our open border and our broken immigration system. I worked with Senator Kyrsten Sinema, Democrat Senator Kyrsten Sinema. With DHS, we developed something called Operation Safe Return. That actually morphed into Return to Mexico, which pretty well solved the problem of unaccompanied children and families abusing our asylum laws. We actually cut our single adults coming across the border illegally in half until Democrat presidential debates where Democrats said they'd stop deportations and offer free health care. Then, of course, President Biden came into office. The border completely opened up. We're dealing with 7,000 people per day being encountered.
Once again, the idea of the border being open when they'll also talk about record arrests.
The human traffickers is largely overlooked and being hidden by this administration and mainstream media.
And we want to go on. We have another question on immigration.
Yes, and this question will go to you first, Mr. Johnson. Another immigration concern is what do we do with the 75,000 undocumented immigrants here in Wisconsin, many who are law-abiding citizens who are also paying state and federal taxes. The country and the state know that they are here, but because they are not here legally, they live in the shadows. What is the pathway for them to become citizens that does not require deportation?
So one of the real tragedies of President Biden's and Democrats' open border policy is because we were so close to having a secure enough border where we could move toward legal immigration reform. I was working with the previous administration. We had a really good system, take about 100 visas down to about 6, award them based on a metric system tied to our economy, and we were also going to take care of the DACA kids and the people you're talking about. But President Biden came into office, blew open the border, and removed that first necessary step.
He's being a Kevin.
You can't offer amnesty and still have a wide open border, or you'll have a flood of millions more people coming to this country illegally, being abused by the human traffickers. Again, abused by the human traffickers. It's horrific what is happening. How do you think young women pay off their human trafficking fees? You know, the border's secure on the Mexican side of the border. Nobody comes across this country without either paying or being indebted to human traffickers. This is a travesty. This is the Democrat policy, is an open border, a flood of illegal immigrants and deadly drugs.
Mr. Johnson, thank you.
Well, this is, again, the senator using fear-mongering. As I said before, he's going to continue to use it in every issue. Now, the reality is the infrastructure bill actually had provisions for border modernization, but Senator Johnson couldn't be bothered to vote for it because he didn't even read the infrastructure bill. He didn't know what was in it. And so if he was very serious about solving a problem, he would have taken the time to do his job, but instead he'd rather play politics and make talking points. Now, we're talking about folks, the people he's trying to make you afraid of. We're talking about people who are working here, people who are paying taxes, contributing to society, contributing to the community, people who should have a path to citizenship. And Senator Johnson wants to talk about a labor or workforce shortage. These are people who are here already doing the hard work, and Ron Johnson wants to do whatever with them. He wants their experience, he wants them to live in limbo. He wants them to continue to live in the shadows.
So again, Mr. Barnes, just to make clear, what would you suggest for their pathway to citizenship?
Oh, we should process them immediately into a path to citizenship. We need to make sure that people who have been here, people who've been working here, people who've been contributing, should have a path to citizenship if they so choose. But the issue has been so demagogue. The issue, again, the fear-mongering that's being used is the reason why we don't have comprehensive immigration reform. They just want to scare the hell out of everybody on this issue when it's only making making people's lives more difficult, and it's contributing to an inhumane system. And as the United States of America, we should be better than that.
You do have a chance to rebuttal.
It has cost us more not to complete the wall that we already contracted for than to actually build it.
All right.
Democrats have voted against 3 of my amendments in committee and on the floor. All but Senator Manchin voted against completing the wall that we had already bought and paid for. You know, unfortunately, Lieutenant Governor Mandela would want to give illegal immigrants a driver's license. Gee, what do you need to vote? Oh, that'd be a driver's license and in-state tuition. That would be a more of a magnet for more illegal immigration, which is why we have to secure our border.
Mr. Barnes, you may respond.
Well, I'll tell you, this is about safety. And if people who are working here need to get to work, people are going to drive regardless. If we can have some sort of checks and balances, making sure we know who's on the road and people can actually get car insurance, gee, that will make communities less safe. People shouldn't have to live in the shadows. And if you went to a school in Wisconsin, you should absolutely be able to pay in-state tuition at one of our wonderful universities. We have reciprocity. We have reciprocity with Minnesota.
All right.
If you went to school here, you should be able to pay in-state tuition.
Thank you.
The moderator for the Barnes-Johnson first debate was really good.
This is on the war in Ukraine, and Mr. Barnes, you will get the first question. President Biden has said, quote, America is fully prepared with our NATO allies to defend every single inch of NATO territory. I
think this is only the second debate where we've gotten a foreign policy question.
As we speak, Russia's president is threatening to use nuclear weapons. Mr. Barnes, do you support more financial aid or military equipment for Ukraine and deploying American military to defend any NATO country if necessary?
Well, I'll tell you, this is a fight for democracy and a fight for freedom abroad, and we need to do everything we can. I'm really, well, first of all, let me say that I'm proud of the Ukrainian people showing immense courage in a difficult situation. We need to do everything we can short of American boots on the ground. There's no appetite for it. And Putin also needs to be held accountable. We need to continue to call out his war crimes. We need to up
I believe of the debates we've watched, but also I'm really high.
We have someone, Senator Johnson,
but not high enough for this show.
Putin as a smart guy. Now, if Putin is successful in Ukraine, he's going to encroach on more territory. It'll also be a green light to other autocratic leaders. There was also an instance where Senator Johnson had to be sat down by the FBI and warned that he may be a Russian asset. We cannot trust Senator Johnson to protect democracy abroad because we can't even trust Senator Johnson to protect democracy here at home.
Mr. Johnson, you do have a chance on a rebuttal for that, and then we'll also, you do have a chance on a rebuttal. We'd also want to ask you that question about Ukraine.
Well, first of all, I wish President Biden were more concerned about defending every inch of U.S. territory against the invasion on our southern border. I certainly would want to
I should have saw that coming.
What we've already allocated,
like invasion.
What the weapons have, what weapons we've sent to Ukraine, what we need to replenish in our own stockpile. I've been to Ukraine repeatedly. I've been the chairman and now ranking member of the European Subcommittee on Foreign Relations. I was at President Zelensky's inauguration. The Ukrainian people want what we want. They want freedom.
You have another 30 seconds. I'm sorry. You have still another 30 seconds.
Okay.
On the question of Ukraine.
I think they probably want this cat to come save them.
So the Ukrainian people want what we want. They're defending their children, their freedom. I think it is good for us freedom-loving peoples to hang together and provide them the defensive weaponry so they can defend their territory. But again, I want a full accounting.
Who's not a freedom-loving person?
In response to the wild.
What are you talking about?
Lieutenant Governor Barnes, the FBI set me up with
I don't know what that voice was I did.
A corrupt briefing and then leaked that to smear me. I am No, I mean,
I'm sorry.
They're laughing at him.
Referring to corruption with the FBI, which I've been trying to.
Let's watch that again. That was great.
The chairman and now ranking member of the European Subcommittee on Foreign Relations. I was at President Zelensky's inauguration. The Ukrainian people want what we want. They want freedom.
You have another 30 seconds. I'm sorry. You have still another 30 seconds.
Okay.
On the question of Ukraine.
Okay. So the Ukrainian people want what we want. They're defending their children, their freedom. I think it is good for us freedom-loving peoples to hang together and provide them the defensive weaponry so they can defend their territory. But again, I want a full accounting. And in response to the wild charge of Lieutenant Governor Barnes, the FBI set me up with a corrupt briefing and then leaked that to smear me. I am. No, I mean,
I'm sorry.
The FBI set me up, and he got laughed at.
Let's talk about. He is referring to corruption with the FBI, which I've been trying to uncover and expose.
All right. So, do we have time for? Please, audience, please. We're trying to get through these. We have time for one more question.
Do you think we're stupid? Do you think we're fools?
1 minute response.
Last year, the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Commission reported ginseng export totaled more than $19 million, the number one consumer being China. Since the trade war started by the Trump administration, one ginseng farmer that we visited in Wausau is concerned that if the tariff issue is not addressed, he and many other central Wisconsin farmers will go out of business. Mr. Johnson, how can you assure them that this is a priority to you?
Well, under the previous administration, I worked long and hard with the Secretary of Commerce to free up those trades so our ginseng farmers could export their product to China. I was not a real fan of the trade wars, but I fully understand.
Oh, they're not wasting their time. They're legitimately investigating them, I would assume.
So from my standpoint, the way you discipline China is you need to get the rest of the trading world hanging together, cooperating, and imposing rules on China. What we also ought to do is we ought to reinitiate the China Initiative, which was what President Biden canceled, is a Department of Justice investigation program to try and track down and investigate Chinese theft of our intellectual property on universities. You know, why did President Biden cancel that? I have no idea. Could it be because he's compromised because of his son's business dealings with China? Might just be the case.
Mr. Barnes, how would you assure that this is a priority to you?
I would assume he's being investigated for his role in January 6th.
Farm back in 2019, I want to say, and I asked about the tariffs and the impact, and he looked at me and said, "Are you asking if these tariffs are going to be the death knell of rural America? Because if you are asking me that, the answer is yes. Our family farms, our businesses, manufacturing has taken a hit because of the tariffs. And when the former president implemented those tariffs, Senator Johnson wasn't there to stand up for our family farms. He wasn't there to stand up for our small businesses. The reality is Senator Johnson has benefited personally from Chinese investments in different companies. Now, what we need to do is make sure that we are on level playing field when it comes to any of our trading partners. That means a set of labor standards. That also means a set of environmental standards so that people aren't getting over on us. And we need to make sure that the American worker and the Wisconsin farmers put first in any of these trade deals.
Mr. Johnson.
All right, clinically, I'm a pothead sometimes.
Once again, I don't know where he gets this stuff. He just makes it off. Again, he's a performer. He's an actor.
Makes it off.
Roll off his tongue. So again, I caution all of you, take everything that Lieutenant Governor Barnes says with a huge grain of salt.
All right, we are down to one final question here, and both of you have said a lot tonight.
The final countdown.
When we traveled around the state talking with voters, we heard repeatedly from people tired of divisive politics and attack ads. So our final question here tonight is, both of you have been successful in life. You have 30 seconds here. Mr. Barnes, you go first. What do you find admirable about your opponent?
Ooh.
Well, no, seriously. I do think, the senator has proven to be a family man, and I think that's admirable. That's absolutely to be respected. He speaks about his family. He's done a lot to provide for them. I absolutely respect that.
Mr. Johnson.
I mean, likewise, I appreciate the fact that Lieutenant Governor Barnes had loving parents, a school teacher, father that worked third shift, so he had good upbringing. I guess what puzzles me about that is with that upbringing.
The both parents thing kind of sounds like a dog whistle.
Why does he find the founding of America awful?
Well, no, seriously. I do think, the senator is proven to be a family man, and I think that's admirable. That's absolutely to be respected. He speaks about his family. He's done a lot to provide for them. I absolutely respect that.
Mr. Johnson.
I mean, likewise, I appreciate the fact that Lieutenant Governor Barnes had loving parents, a school teacher, father that worked third shift, so he had good upbringing. I guess what puzzles me about that is with that upbringing, why is he turned against America? I mean, why does he find the founding of America awful? It's
Somehow,
it puzzles me.
We did not.
We said something admirable. And it is now time. Somehow we have made it to the end of this debate for closing statements, and I appreciate both of you gentlemen. At this time, we would like to ask the audience to please hold your applause, your feelings until the end of both candidates concluding their comments. Mr. Johnson, why should voters pick you on November 8th?
Wisconsin voters ought to be asking, are you better off or worse off since Democrats took control? Considering 40-year high inflation, record gas prices, skyrocketing crime, an open border, flooded deadly drugs, I think it's pretty obvious most people are worse off. What's important to notice is that these problems didn't just happen. They were the direct result of Democrat policies and Democrat governance. And Lieutenant Governor Barnes supports all these policies causing you and your family so much pain. If elected, he would be a rubber stamp for President Biden and Senator Schumer, and together they would make matters even worse. When I first ran for office, I made two promises. I'll always tell you the truth, and I'll never vote with my election.
He got laughed at for that one.
Election in mind. I've honored those promises scrupulously. And if I am reelected, I'll do everything I can to help improve things and heal and unify this nation, and I'm asking for your vote.
So thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciate this opportunity. And while the senator wants to lie and distract and hide from his own record, and while he subscribes to the politics of division, what he doesn't realize is that each and every one of us in all 72 counties in this state has so much more in common with each other than we'll ever have with self-serving, out-of-touch politicians. Now, unfortunately, for the last 12 years, we've experienced the failures of his leadership and his representation. Women's lives and women's health are on the line. For our veterans who may have been victims of burn pits, you don't want a senator who's going to play politics with your life. For our retirees, we don't want a person who's going to take your retirement away from you, what you've worked hard for your entire life. Working people live with the constant threat of their jobs being shipped out of state or overseas. Our democracy hangs in the balance. Senator Johnson tried to overturn a free and fair election because he didn't like the result. He tried to send fake electors to the vice president, said his involvement lasted a matter of seconds, as if you get to use the 5-second rule for election subversion.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes and Mr. Johnson, for meeting us on this debate stage tonight.
Now you can applaud for both of them.
Now you can applaud.
Ron Johnson took a question, what he found admirable about his opponent, attacked his opponent in that question, and then said he would be a unifier and bring people together. Just the audacity, the caucasity to pull such a move. Wow. And I believe the moderators called him out. And like Barnes not saying anything about it, he looked like the stand-up guy. I think Ron looked shitty in that exchange. I give that one to Barnes again. I gave the first one to Barnes, but apparently Ron Johnson's polling has gone up since the first debate, so I don't understand it. When we come back on the other side of the break, we're going to do a quick rundown of the news. We're going to talk about the January 6th committee hearing earlier today. We're going to see video of Pelosi calling for help. We're going to talk about the Roger Stone connection to January 6th. They subpoenaed Trump. They took a vote to subpoena Trump, so that's going to be interesting. A judge has denied Trump's request to pause a deposition in his rape case. He's apparently started a new company to try to get out of charges in New York State. Also, it's just another day in mass shooting USA. So we're going to find out what happened in Raleigh, North Carolina. Also, cops were ambushed in Connecticut. We're going to cover that story. And jurors in Parkland have come to a decision on the fate of the Parkland shooter. Plus, I got another woman going to a school board meeting, going viral, causing a stir at a board meeting over a drag show, because right-wingers are morons. All that and more on the other side of the break. We're on the Troll Patrol, live.
This is WWE superstar and multiple-time champion Seth Rollins. Seth is one of the top wrestlers in the industry, and never in a million years would I expect that Seth would be spying on me, or at least following me on social media. You see, a few years ago, around 2015 or 2016, Seth started referring to himself as
Seth freaking Rollins.
Now, Justin, you may say, your name is Justin Freakin. That's not very similar. And you'd be right. But I actually rebranded myself as Justin Freakin after Rollins blatantly stole my gimmick. Before last year, I went by
Justin Freakin Mullins. Justin Freakin Mullins.
Justin Freakin Mullins.
I am on film and audio, calling myself Justin Freakin Mullins several years before Seth Rollins. And if we take a trip in the Wayback Machine, we can see that I've actually been using the appellative since I was in high school. If this was Seth's only offense, I might let it slide. But recently he started referring to himself as
The Monday Night Messiah.
I wonder where I have heard something like that before.
I am the new media messiah.
I am the new media messiah.
Self-proclaimed new media messiah.
The new media messiah.
So, Seth, since you and the WWE are clearly paying attention to me, consider this video your cease and desist to stop infringing on my intellectual property, and issue me a check for a cut of that sweet merchandise money. Obviously, you and the WWE are big fans of my ideas, so maybe you should offer me a slot on the creative team. Anyone who has watched Raw in the past decade knows you could use the help. And if you're watching this video and you're not Seth Rollins, check out the links below to learn how you can contribute to my legal fund.
Now we turn to YouTuber Justin Freakin. The guy's, he's a formidable voice in the culture. Uncensored and unfiltered political talk and debate from a leftist perspective. The day's top news stories and videos with astute social commentary.
Not high enough for this shit.
All we're establishing is this guy's wicked sick aesthetic.
Right-wingers are morons.
You brought back the wrong kind of fucking cake, you idiot.
Guess I gotta thank Matt Walsh for introducing me to Justin Freakin.
Yet you're like, we'll pray for somebody. You think you can telepathically communicate with a deity, and you have the audacity to say somebody else has a mental disorder. For the love of God. Whoosh. You are now have the diarrheas. Well, that was a fun time. I'm still stunned about Ron Johnson. Given the opportunity to say something admirable about his opponent, took the opportunity to attack his opponent, and then said he would unite people. Insane. Insane. The other big story today was the January 6th committee hearing. Apparently, the Secret Service reached out to the Oath Keepers, the founder of the Oath Keepers and other leaders of the self-styled militia organization were in contact with Secret Service officials multiple times in late 2020 and leading up to the attack on the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. This is according to an agency official and court testimony in Stuart Rhodes's ongoing seditious conspiracy trial. A former member of the Oath Keepers testified last week that Rhodes, the group's founder, claimed to be in touch with someone in the Secret Service in the months before the riot. The Secret Service official confirmed that members of the agency's Protective Intelligence Division reached out to the Oath Keepers in advance of protests in D.C. in November and December, as well as the January 6th Stop the Steal rally. Agents regularly engage in such advanced contact with protest groups expected to attend public presidential events, the official said. The goal is to explain what items are prohibited and learn more about the protesters' numbers and plans in order to assess the risk to protected officials. Rhodes and 4 associates are now in the midst of a trial, and I want to know how buddy they got with them. And hold on, like, incredibly small. You guys can't read along. Rhodes and 4 associates are now in the midst of a trial expected to last at least a month, in which they face the most serious charge of the criminal investigation into the Capitol riot. Jurors have heard evidence that prosecutors say shows the Oath Keepers wanted to keep Donald Trump in power by force. Trial testimony that comes just as the House committee investigating January 6th prepared for what is expected to be its final public hearing. During that hearing today, we saw a video of Pelosi calling for help and all the agencies she reached out to.
Hi, Governor. This is Nancy. Governor, I don't know if you have been approached about the Virginia National Guard. Mr. Hoyer was speaking to Governor Hogan, but I still think you probably need the okay of the federal government in order to come into another jurisdiction. Thank you. Oh my gosh. They're just breaking windows. They're doing all.
Schumer is talking about contacting the Secretary of the Army.
It's really that they said somebody was shot. It was just horrendous, and all at the instigation of the President of the United States. Okay, thank you, Governor. I appreciate what you're doing, and if you don't mind, I'd like to stay in touch. Thank you.
Okay. That was at the time the Democratic governor of Virginia
has been called in.
You know, I'm just talking to Governor Northam, and what he said is they sent 200 state police and a unit of the National Guard.
So this is Schiff talking about how text emails suggest the Secret Service knew of the violence.
In our past hearings, you have seen direct evidence that President Trump sent a crowd of his supporters to the Capitol on January 6th, knowing they were armed and angry. This was the last, most desperate and dangerous prong of his plan to disrupt the joint session and prevent the orderly transition of power. On the morning of the 6th, the Secret Service was at the Ellipse, screening the members of the crowd as they entered the rally site. And they noticed something significant about the crowd. Tens of thousands of people were outside the rally site, but did not want to go through the magnetometers, the metal detectors that were used to screen for dangerous weapons. Since our last hearings, the Select Committee has received greater cooperation from the Secret Service. Nevertheless, Secret Service text messages from this period were erased in the days and months following the attack on the Capitol, even though documents and materials related to January 6th had already been requested by the Department of Justice and Congress. But we were able to obtain nearly 1 million emails, recordings, and other electronic records from the Secret Service. Over the month of August, the Select Committee began its review of hundreds of thousands of pages and multiple hours of that material, providing substantial new evidence about what happened on January 6th and the days leading up to it. That review continues. What you're about to hear is just a sample of the new and relevant evidence that we have received. Mounting evidence before January 6th predicted violence. And not just violence generally, but violence directed at the Capitol. Intelligence about this risk was directly available to the U.S. Secret Service and others in the White House in advance of the ellipse speech, in advance of the march to the Capitol. The committee has shown evidence that President Trump was aware of the risk of violence. The FBI, U.S. Capitol Police, Metropolitan Police, and other agencies all gathered and disseminated intelligence suggesting the possibility of violence at the Capitol prior to the riot. We're now going to show you just a sample of the evidence we have received. Days before January 6th, the president's senior advisors at the Department of Justice and FBI, for example, received an intelligence summary that included material indicating that certain people traveling to Washington were making plans to attack the Capitol. This summary noted online calls to occupy federal buildings, rhetoric about invading the Capitol building, and plans to arm themselves and to engage in political violence at the event. Other agencies were also hearing predictions suggesting possible violence at the Capitol. On a call with President Trump's White House National Security Staff in early January 2021, Deputy Secretary of Defense David Norquist had warned about the potential that the Capitol would be the target of the attack. Here's General Mark Milley, who was also present for this call, describing Deputy Secretary Norquist's warning.
So during these calls, I only remember it in hindsight because he was almost like clairvoyant. Norquist says during one of these calls, the greatest threat is a direct assault on the Capitol. I'll never forget it.
This email, for example, was an alert that the Secret Service received on December 24th with the heading, "Armed and Ready, Mr. President." According to the intelligence, multiple users online were targeting members of Congress, instructing others to march into the chambers on January 6th and make sure they know who to fear. In this report, received on December 26th, the Secret Service field office relayed a tip that had been received by the FBI. According to the source of the tip, the Proud Boys plan to march armed into D.C. They think that they will have a large enough group to march into D.C. armed, the source reported, and will outnumber the police so they can't be stopped. The source went on to say, their plan is to literally kill people. Please take this tip seriously and investigate further. The source also made clear that the Proud Boys had detailed their plans on multiple websites, like the Donald.win. Let's pause here. The Secret Service had advance information more than 10 days beforehand regarding the Proud Boys planning for January 6th. We know now, of course, that the Proud Boys and others did lead the assault on our Capitol building. On December 31st, agents circulated intelligence reports that President Trump's supporters have proposed a movement to occupy Capitol Hill. In particular, they flagged spikes in violent hashtags like "We Are the Storm," 1776 Rebel, and Occupy Capitals. On January 5th, a Secret Service open source unit flagged a social media account on the Donald.win that threatened to bring a sniper rifle to a rally on January 6th. The user also posted a picture of a handgun and rifle with the caption, "Sunday Gun Day, providing Overwatch January 6th will be wild." Later, on the evening of January 5th, the Secret Service learned during an FBI briefing that right-wing groups were establishing armed QRFs, or Quick Reaction Forces, readying to deploy for January 6th. Groups like the Oath Keepers were standing by at the ready should POTUS request assistance. By invoking the Insurrection Act, agents were informed. As we all know now, the Oath Keepers did play a specific role on January 6th and had stashed weapons in Virginia for further violence that evening. Also on that day, the Secret Service was readying its security precautions for the president's speech at the ellipse the next day. A Secret Service deputy chief instructed agents to add certain objects to the list of items that would be prohibited at the rally site, including ballistic vests, tactical vests, armored or not, and ballistic helmets. By the morning of January 6th, it was clear that the Secret Service anticipated violence. It felt like the calm before the storm, one agent predicted in a Protective Intelligence Division chat group. Another remarked how agents were watching the crazies on live stream. By 9:09 that morning, the Secret Service could also see that many rally-goers were assembled outside the security perimeter. One agent emailed, possibly because they have stuff that couldn't come through, would probably be an issue with this crowd. Just a thought. By 9:30 that morning, agents reported more than 25,000 people outside the rally site. An hour later, the Secret Service reported that the crowd was on the mall watching, but not in line. The head of the President's Secret Service Protective Detail, Robert Engel, was specifically aware of the large crowds outside the magnetometers. He passed that information along to Tony Ornato, who worked for Mark Meadows in the Chief of Staff's office. The documents we obtained from the Secret Service make clear that the crowd outside the magnetometers was armed and the agents knew it. Take a look at what they were seeing and hearing on the ground. One report from the rally site at 7:58 a.m. said, some members of the crowd are wearing ballistic helmets, body armor, carrying radio equipment, and military-grade backpacks. Another, from 9:30 a.m., said that there were possibly OC spray, meaning pepper spray, and/or plastic riot shields. At 11:23 a.m., agents also reported possible armed individuals, one with a Glock, one with a rifle. Over the next hour, agents reported possible man with a gun reported, confirmed pistol on hip located in a tree, and one detained at 14th and I Street Northwest. Individual had an assault rifle on his
It sure doesn't get any better from here with the news.
Minutes before President Trump began his speech, members of the Federal Protective Service, an agency tasked with protecting federal buildings, were alerted about an arrest of a protester with a gun on his waistband.
Yeah, Schiff is not the most enthralling speaker, and we are 9 minutes into this, but it was kind of juicy. Let's go over the Roger Stone connection to January 6th, because he's kind of the bridge between the paramilitary groups and the administration.
Another close associate of Donald Trump apparently knew of Mr. Trump's intentions as well. Now, Roger Stone is a political operative with a reputation for dirty tricks. In November 2019, he was convicted of lying to Congress and other crimes and sentenced to more than 3 years in prison. He's also a longtime advisor to President Trump and was in communication with President Trump throughout 2020. Mr. Trump pardoned Roger Stone on December 23rd, 2020. Now, recently, the Select Committee got footage of Mr. Stone before and after the election from Danish filmmaker Christopher Gulbrandsen, pursuant to a subpoena. Right before the election, here's Roger Stone talking about what President Trump would do after the election.
Let's just hope we're celebrating. I really do suspect it'll still be up in the air. But when that happens, the key thing to do is to claim victory. Possession is 9/10 of the law. No, we won. Fuck you. Sorry, over. We won. Yeah. You're wrong. Fuck you.
ABC.
I said, fuck the Lord, and let's get right to the violence. That's what I'm
And he did a dry run of this in Florida in 2000.
Start smashing pumpkins, if you know what I mean. Oh, yeah.
Gonna call up Billy
Corgan? The Select Committee called Mr. Stone as a witness, but he invoked his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination.
Do you believe the violence on January 6th was justified?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer your question on the basis of the Fifth Amendment.
And Mr. Stone, did you have any role in planning for the violence on January 6th?
Once again, I will assert my Fifth Amendment right to decline to answer your question.
Although we don't yet have all the relevant records of Roger Stone's communications. Even Stone's own social media posts acknowledge that he spoke with Donald Trump on December 27th as preparations for January 6th were underway. In this post, you can see how Roger Stone talked about his conversations with President Trump. He wrote, "I also told the president exactly how he can appoint a special counsel with full subpoena power to ensure those who are attempting to steal the 2020 election through voter fraud are charged and convicted."
Well, we know who attempted to steal the 2020 election. Let's make sure they're charged and convicted.
As we know by now, the idea for a special counsel was not just an idle suggestion. It was something President Trump had actually tried to do earlier
Fox is
that
being a
month.
Kevin. Hold on.
We know that Roger Stone was at the Willard Hotel on January 5th and 6th, and we know from other witness testimony that President Trump asked his chief of staff, Mark Meadows, to speak with Roger Stone and General Michael Flynn that night. In addition to his connection to President Trump, Roger Stone maintained extensive direct connections to two groups responsible for violently attacking the Capitol, the Oath Keepers and the Proud
Boys.
Individuals from both of these organizations have been charged with the crime of seditious conspiracy. Now, what is seditious conspiracy? It is a conspiracy to use violent force against the United States, to oppose the lawful authority of the United States. Multiple associates of Roger Stone from both the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys have been charged with this crime. Close associates of Roger Stone, including Joshua James, have pled guilty to this crime. We know that at least 7 Oath Keepers who have been criminally charged provided personal security for Roger Stone or were seen with him on January 6th or in the weeks leading up to January 6th. For example, Joshua James, the leader of the Alabama Oath Keepers, provided security for Roger Stone and was with him on January 5th. This is the picture of the two together on January 5th. James entered the Capitol on January 6th.
Roger's a sharp-dressed man.
Police officer. Earlier this year, he pled guilty to seditious conspiracy and obstruction of Congress. Another example is the married couple, Kelly and Connie Meggs. Now, Kelly Meggs was the leader of the Florida chapter of the Oath Keepers. Both he and his wife provided security for Roger Stone, and both are charged with leading a military-style stack attack of Oath Keepers, attacking the Capitol on January 6th. Perhaps even more disturbing is Roger Stone's close association with Enrique Tarrio, the national chairman of the Proud Boys. Roger Stone's connection with Enrique Tarrio and the Proud Boys is well documented by video evidence with phone records the Select Committee has obtained. Tarrio, along with other Proud Boys, has been charged with multiple crimes concerning the attack on January 6th, including seditious conspiracy. During the attack, Tarrio sent a message to other Proud Boys claiming, "We did that." He also visited the White House on December 12th. Later that day, he posted a disturbing video claiming credit for the attack. This video, posted on January 6th, was apparently created prior to the attack.
I mean, like, the committee didn't do that to his video, did they? That would be weird.
This big lie, President Trump's effort to convince Americans that he had won the 2020 election, began before the election results even came in. It was intentional, it was premeditated, it was not based on election results or any evidence of actual fraud affecting the results or any actual problems with voting machines.
Now, you heard Representative Zoe Lofgren mention that Roger Stone took the fifth.
She's a young woman from Wyoming.
Liz Cheney ran down all of Trump's associates who had pled the fifth.
It was recognized on her resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, our committee now has sufficient information to answer many of the critical questions posed by Congress at the outset. We have sufficient information to consider criminal referrals for multiple individuals and to recommend a range of legislative proposals to guard against another January 6th. But a key task remains. We must seek the testimony under oath of January 6th central player. More than 30 witnesses in our investigation have invoked their Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, and several of those did so specifically in response to questions about their dealings with Donald Trump directly. Here are a few examples. This is Roger Stone with Oath Keepers at the Willard Hotel on the morning of January 6th. And here is Mr. Stone testifying before our committee. Did you speak to President Trump on his private cell phone on either January 5th or January 6th?
Once again, on advice of counsel, I will assert my Fifth Amendment right to respectfully decline to answer your question.
This is General Michael Flynn walking with Oath Keepers on December 12th, 2020. And here is General Flynn's testimony before our committee.
Did you, General Flynn, talk to President Trump at any point on January 6, 2021?
The 5th.
Here is John Eastman, fraudulently instructing tens of thousands of angry protesters that the vice president could change the election outcome on January 6th. Later on this same day, Dr. Eastman acknowledged in writing that Donald Trump knew what he was attempting was illegal. Here is John Eastman testifying before our committee.
Did President Trump authorize you to discuss publicly your January 4th, 2021 conversation with him?
5th.
So is it your position that you can discuss in the media direct conversations you had with the President of the United States, but you will not discuss those same conversations with this committee?
5th.
Here is Jeff Clark, who conspired with Donald Trump to corrupt the Department of Justice. President Trump wanted to appoint Jeff Clark as acting Attorney General. And as you can see in this call log we obtained from the National Archives, he did so. And here is Mr. Clark testifying before our committee.
At 4:20, he was speaking to Trump at 4:20.
Mr. Clark, when did you first talk directly with President Trump?
5th.
Mr. Clark, did you discuss with President Trump allegations of fraud in the 2020 election?
5th.
Other witnesses have also gone to enormous lengths to avoid testifying about their dealings with Donald Trump. Steve Bannon has been tried and convicted by a jury of his peers for contempt of Congress. He is scheduled to be sentenced for this crime later this month. Criminal proceedings regarding Peter Navarro continue. And Mark Meadows, Donald Trump's former chief of staff, has refused to testify based upon executive privilege. The committee's litigation with him continues. Mr. Chairman, at some point, the Department of Justice may well unearth the facts that these and other witnesses are currently concealing. But our duty today is to our country and our children and our Constitution. We are obligated to seek answers directly from the man who set this all in motion. And every American is entitled to those answers, so we can act now to protect our republic. So this afternoon, I am offering this resolution that the committee direct the chairman to issue a subpoena for relevant documents and testimony under oath from Donald John Trump in connection with the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol.
Boom. So there you go. Recommendation for a subpoena of Donald Trump for his testimony in front of the committee. You know the shit libs over on MSNBC were having a field day with this, so let's go to see what they had to say. They might come live on air.
Yes, NBC News.
Pregnant Trump, that would be a plot twist right there. Coming out and showing that men can get pregnant to the far right nut jobs.
can now report that the January 6th committee plans to vote to subpoena former President Donald Trump during today's hearing. Sources familiar with the committee's plans tell NBC News, with members wanting to put this historic move on the public record, despite multiple members previously acknowledging how difficult or even unlikely it would be for the former president to comply. And this subpoena
he will challenge it
with the current Congress, Katie. But this has been noticed to the Speaker of the House. Speaker Pelosi has been notified of it. It would not be unprecedented. We understand that, from our former Justice correspondent Pete Williams has written notes to this effect that Thomas Jefferson, Richard Nixon, and Bill Clinton were all subpoenaed by Congress. Jefferson refused to comply on documents. Nixon won the tapes, resigned instead. Bill Clinton agreed to testify, so the subpoena was withdrawn. But, Katie, this would be an extraordinary step, and there's been a lot of other testimony today that is just compelling. We'll go through that in a moment.
It would be an extraordinary step in this moment. The question is, would Donald Trump want to take him up on that? Would he want that live audience, all those millions of people watching?
I kind of think he would. I kind of think that Donald Trump is stupid enough to get up there and just incriminate himself all over the place. Talk about how unfair the election was to him. Go up there, tell all his lies in front of the committee. It would be fun to watch. It would be one of the most watched committee hearings, if not the most watched committee hearing ever.
To see him push back directly on the committee. We know from reporting that he has been frustrated by a lack of defense that he's seen in these committee hearings, which have got millions upon millions upon millions of viewers, tens of millions of viewers, a large, giant audience. Will Donald Trump want to turn away that opportunity? That is an open question. We got a little bit of an indication that this was where this committee was going right at the outset of this committee hearing when Liz Cheney said we can't just punish the foot soldiers. And they've been trying to paint this picture that Donald Trump was in the center of it. Donald Trump knew what was going to happen. He was a part of this. And then she said this. Let's listen.
Mr. Chairman, the violence and lawlessness of January 6th was unjustifiable. But our nation cannot only punish the foot soldiers who stormed our Capitol. Those who planned to overturn our election and brought us to the point of violence must also be accountable. With every effort to excuse or justify the conduct of the former president, we chip away at the foundation of our republic. Indefensible conduct is defended, inexcusable conduct is excused. Without accountability, it all becomes normal, and it will recur. So as we watch the evidence today, please consider where our nation is in its history. Consider whether we can survive for another 246 years. Most people in most places on earth have not been free. America is an exception. And America continues only because we bind ourselves to our founders' principles, to our Constitution. We recognize that some principles must be beyond politics, inviolate, and more important than any single American.
There was a campaign ad for Cheney by her father, Dick Cheney, where he's talking about Donald Trump and being a threat to democracy. And I saw somebody tweet out that if you played that video for somebody in 2003, they would be incredibly confused as to what was going on.
Who has ever lived.
And with her making that point, that is the frame that they initially wanted to put on all of this, that Donald Trump broke all the rules, had a premeditated plan, was told repeatedly by top officials that the election was over, had not been stolen. But I just want to point out, Katie, that it's one thing for him to say at a rally, as he just did the other day, that the election was stolen, and you go through all of these false statements. He can't do that under oath to Congress. So testifying would be at the risk of perjuring himself and creating a crime in full view.
It would. It would definitely put him in a more perilous position. I'm certain the committee.
Oh, I would assume there's not a lawyer alive. Maybe a Lionel Hutz type of lawyer that would tell Trump to testify. But I would assume most credible lawyers would tell him it is a very, very bad idea to testify. However, it's Trump.
Committee would want to have him come do exactly that, as he has done in public. But it is a tempting prospect, is my point about Donald Trump. We'll see if any of his lawyers are successful, if he wanted to, in fighting back to say, no, this is not a good idea. Back with us.
See, even she assumes that all of his lawyers would tell him it was a bad idea. Meanwhile, a judge has denied his request to pause a deposition in the, I believe this is the E. Jean Carroll
the House
case.
Select Committee investigating January 6th is set to hold another hearing tomorrow, the first one since July, but there won't be any witnesses appearing in person. This hearing is supposed to feature new testimony and evidence. The committee is expecting to focus on former President Trump's continued efforts to claim that the 2020 election was stolen.
We already covered all this. You're behind the
hammer
times.
home the idea that the former president remains a clear and present danger to democracy. Former President Trump will also not be getting out of an upcoming deposition in a defamation lawsuit.
A federal judge denied Trump's request to pause the deposition, which is scheduled for a week from today. Columnist E. Jean Carroll sued Trump in 2019 after he denied raping her in the mid-1990s and accused her of fabricating the claim to boost book sales. Trump has denied all allegations against him.
Well, a federal judge rejected the former president's attempt to pause the deposition. The judge saying that Trump's efforts to delay the case are, quote, inexcusable.
He got out of testifying the last time because he stayed at Mar-a-Lago during the hurricane. Hurricane Ian, I believe it was, yeah. Stayed at Mar-a-Lago through the hurricane. Said, oops, we can't come testify. So it got moved to a week from today. Apparently, Trump has formed a new company in a possible attempt to evade the New York State lawsuit. Days before the New York Attorney General filed a lawsuit accusing Donald J. Trump and his company of fraud and seeking to shut down some of their business in the state, Mr. Trump's lawyers created a new company in Delaware. Delaware, which has some of the loosest financial laws in the country, partially as a result from one Mr. Joe Biden's lobbying on behalf of credit card companies in Wall Street. The new company's name had a familiar ring to it, the Trump Organization, the same name as his old company, now threatened by the lawsuit. How do you start a new company with the same name? On September 21st, the day the suit was filed, the new Delaware company filed paperwork in New York seeking to be recognized there as the Trump Organization 2. This is Trump Organization 2, Electric Boogaloo. Those maneuvers were detailed for the first time in a court filing on Thursday from the Attorney General, Letitia James, who raised the prospect that Mr. Trump was seeking to an end run around some of her lawsuit's harshest potential punishments by forming the new company. Her filing said the Trump Organization now appears to be taking steps to restructure its business to avoid existing responsibilities under New York law, raising concerns that the business might shift assets out of the state. Oh, Trumpy boy. Let's quickly move over to the UK, where Trussy Girl is having a hard time. New British Prime Minister Liz Truss, only been Prime Minister for what, a little over a month now? Not looking too good that she's going to continue as Prime Minister. Truss is considering raising corporate tax rates. This was after she came to power promising austerity in the UK, having to backtrack now.
Going to blink first. I think we now know the answer. I think probably there is an argument to say that Governor Bailey was talking to the government when he said you've got 3 days to sort this out. He may have been talking to the market as well, but it certainly seems as if that threat has resonated in number 10 and number 11 Downing Street. The market is moving on rumours at the moment. As you say, we still don't know the details of exactly what is going to be reversed, which aspects of the unfunded tax policy that we're going to be seeing changed. I think the Sun report is very, very interesting. John, the market has been all over the place this morning. We initially saw a big move lower in yields. And you do wonder whether or not that is predicated on the idea that we are seeing the Bank of England's policies and the help it's being provided having an effect, or rumours have been swirling about a U-turn. Kitty Donaldson and the team confirming that now, that there is a conversation happening about a U-turn, and you've seen the market response off that. This is what the market was primed for. It was waiting for the government to blink. And it looks like we're getting close to the government blinking.
How much does the government have to blink because of conservative pushback, a pushback from Liz Truss's own administration to say this is infeasible and could potentially undermine any potential growth in the UK for years to come?
I think it's coming from a number of different areas. Clearly within the Conservative Party, there is much annoyance about the way that this has been handled.
Much annoyance.
Her authority has been diminished also almost from the get-go, Lisa.
Oh, you British people. Never stop being British.
It's coming from Conservative Party donors. It's coming from a whole host of sources at the moment, and the force of that is now clearly too much for the government to bear. And as a result of which, we are going to have yet another U-turn. I'm not even sure which way we're facing at the moment. I think we'll probably maybe find out at the end of the day.
Doing the hokey pokey over in the UK with Liz Truss as the Prime Minister. I don't know how long she's going to make it. I think the Conservatives may yeet her. They may break down and just call a snap election. Who knows what's going to happen? I mean, one of the things that Warlord explained to me was the fact that, you know, the party in charge is in charge of calling a snap election. So why would the Conservatives want to call an election if they are poised to lose and they have power? I believe an election must happen before 2025. Was that correct? Belarus declares counter-terrorist operation regime. What? Counter-terrorist operation regime has been declared in Belarus, and the country's army and special services ready to respond to any provocations from neighboring countries. According to Belarusian Foreign Minister Vladimir Mackay. In Minsk yesterday, they officially accused Ukraine in preparation for attacking the territory of Belarus. What? This is very confusing. If I remember correctly, Belarus has a pro-Russian regime currently. Correct, Warlord? Is that the dude that really likes the horses? there is one autocratic president of one of those satellite countries that really likes horses, and I think it's the president of Belarus. Well, Putin likes horses as well, but I want to say the president of Belarus has like multiple like show horses, like dressage horses, or some shit. And I think I know this from John Oliver. I think John Oliver did a piece on it. All right, this is the story that Warlord alerted me to, like right as we were coming on. Content warning. Apparently, it's just another day. Mass shooting USA. This time in North Carolina. Like we have 5 dead in Raleigh, North Carolina shooting spree. Gunman has opened fire in a neighborhood in Raleigh, North Carolina, killing at least 5 people and injuring several others, according to witnesses and local officials. The suspect was later taken into custody. The incident began just after 5 p.m. on Thursday when officers were called to an active shooter in the Neuse River Greenway in East Raleigh, about 130 miles northeast of Charlotte. This is reported seeing a white male, possibly a teenager, who was dressed in... I I bet he was White. Who was dressed in camouflage and armed with a long barrel shotgun. They took him alive. Oh, the horse guy is Turkmenistan. Not immediately clear whether he knew any of his victims, but shots were fired at multiple locations. Aerial footage showed a car riddled with bullets at one of the scenes. Well, you know what we got to do now? See if we can at least get a local news hit on this. Apparently a cop was among those killed. This is the local news hit. Oh, this is the live coverage.
In about an hour from now. But what we know is the update from the Raleigh Police Department just in the past few minutes is that the shooter is now in custody after that person was described as being contained inside some sort of structure in eastern Wake County. We're still trying to get some eyes on that. And Joel Brown is in that neighborhood. He's in that neck of the woods off Old Mill Burney Road, just west of 540, east from Headingham, east across the Neuse River from where all this started earlier today. So Joel,
Neuse River, I said it correctly.
And one of our photojournalists are trying to get in there right now.
Also, where to get that name from?
To better understand where that gun
in North Carolina
was contained and eventually detained, eventually taken into custody just a short time ago. The other remaining question is, as it relates to the gunman, is where is that person headed now? It was described as under police guard or potentially going to the jail, Wake County Jail on Hammond Road. It's not clear where that person is headed yet, but we're working to sort that information out. And
I would assume the jail.
Finding out who this person is.
Yeah, the joy of living in a city like Raleigh is having a level 1 trauma center that we can transport victims in crisis to at a moment's notice, and they're ready on hand with the frontline workers.
Yeah,
there.
rub it in as a lot of
everyone
rural
there tonight,
areas
very
have been
busy,
deprived of their
since
level
5
1
o'clock
trauma
this
center.
afternoon. When
Thanks to
they got the
cutbacks.
call that they were transporting victims to the hospital there. So.
And as we showed you with our crews on the scene at Wake Med through the evening, there was a large law enforcement presence there. The Brotherhood in blue, the men and women in uniform were coming together to comfort each other when word spread very quickly that one Raleigh police officer ultimately died as a result of gunshot wounds and another was shot. We saw so many people from so many agencies going there to Wake Med to be together, provide each other comfort. It's what members of the law enforcement community do whenever.
If the suspect killed a cop, he is going to get
continued support at
the
Wake Med
basement of the jail treatment before
not
we
clear
actually
if
see.
the
When we see his
officer
mugshot, his face will be completely black and blue.
Yes, was that person was taken to Wake Med, and every effort was made to save the person's life.
Yeah, he may die under mysterious circumstances in the jail, but this seems pretty high profile, so that might not happen.
Yeah, heavy hearts at Wake Med as well.
They could get away with it, though.
Price has been in that Eagle Trace neighborhood all evening, talking to people and telling us what she's seen. It looks like the scene has cleared up just a bit there, Jamisa. What can you tell us at this hour?
Yeah, these folks are still trying to get home. Just spoke with one driver. He had been waiting at this point for about an hour, and that's from South Hall to where we are right now, which is, I believe this is Murphyfield Village Way, at Eagle Trace Drive. So that's about a half a mile from where we were initially when all of this happened, and it's also about another half a mile.
It's wild that it happened in a residential neighborhood. That doesn't fit the
kind of blocking everybody
profile
from moving any further at this point. So folks are just still trying to get home here, and I know we've been talking a lot just about the heavy hearts here in the city of Raleigh tonight, and I've been watching these officers work throughout the evening, just going back and forth. And at one point, when one of those officers They were trying to get around this area where some of the cars were, so they were kind of stuck here where I could see them, and it was for the first time I could really see the pain.
Once again, this is live from Raleigh, North Carolina. There are at least 5 people dead, including one cop who was apparently off duty.
In disbelief that all of this is happening. It is a lot to process. We're talking 5 people killed tonight, one of those being a Raleigh police
Yes, Lenny, stay tuned. We're actually going to hear from some of the jurors in the
a lot of concern for people
shooting
in this community. I met some folks who believe that the
Parkland shooter trial, I should
is
say,
their neighbor. So they were definitely concerned, telling me they have a good relationship. It's somebody they come in contact with on a daily basis. So they are definitely concerned, clearly and rightfully so. So we are still seeing those officers leave. We're still seeing officers come through, some with their flashing lights, others without. So I would still consider this an active scene at this point, with a number of law enforcement officers who continue to make their way up here on Eagle Trace Drive. So we're trying to see how long it's going to be for these folks to get back home. I just seen one lady pass us here with some food because people can't get to their homes.
Gonna be passing out some pizza.
They need to get to their kids. They need to get home. They've worked all day, and now they've been in the car for hours. So again, the last person I just spoke with, he had been waiting at this point just to get a half a mile for about an hour. So Steve and Lauren, yeah, a lot of people just a little bit antsy at this point, ready to just get home.
Yeah, it's been an evening of high.
That gives you an idea of what is going on in North Carolina. Let's go to Connecticut, where apparently last night cops were ambushed. 2 Connecticut officers dead. 1 was hurt in an apparent ambush.
Turn now
Here's
to
the local news hit.
Developing story out of Connecticut, where police say 2 officers have died and another is hurt in what's believed to be an ambush-style shooting. The one who survived is hospitalized in critical condition. ABC's Rena Roy has the latest.
A somber procession in Bristol, Connecticut Thursday, dozens of heartbroken officers saluting their fallen colleagues.
Our hearts are broken. We're united in immeasurable
Kind of cold in here. I can't take my shirt
officers, for their families and friends, and for all of our law enforcement personnel.
Police say Sergeant Dustin DeMonte and Officer Alex Hamzy were killed Wednesday night in an apparent ambush attack.
Sadly, we lost 2 exceptional Bristol police officers, and a third was seriously injured as a result of senseless violence.
The third officer, Alex Ayarado, released from the hospital Thursday morning after undergoing surgery for a severe gunshot wound. Police sources tell ABC News the incident.
I mean, if I had to guess, it could have been another cop that had pulled some shady shit. Trying to protect their ass, or a cop that was trying to expose corruption on the force and got retaliated against. Or it could have been random, and it wasn't even like the cops were ambushed.
It may have started when officers responded to a disorderly patron at a bar and issued a summons. Authorities say the suspect, identified as Nicholas Brutcher, then went home, armed himself with an AR-15 style rifle, and made a fake 911 call for a domestic disturbance in a potentially deliberate attempt to lure officers there.
Oh, okay. Well, that's what happened. Dude was drunk at a bar, and a cop accosted him, and he went home and decided to get into some trouble. Wow.
Patron at a bar and issued a summons. Authorities say the suspect, identified as Nicholas Brutcher, then went home, armed himself with an AR-15 style rifle, and made a fake 911 call for a domestic disturbance in a potentially deliberate attempt to lure officers there.
When officers arrived, they were immediately met with a suspect. Shots were fired.
The suspect shot and killed. His brother, who was there, was also shot. Sergeant DeMonte had a wife, 2 kids, and a third on the way. Officer Hamzy is survived by his wife. This tragedy unfolding just hours after 3 SWAT officers were hurt in Philadelphia after gunfire erupted while they were executing a search warrant. The suspect, who fired at officers through a door and a window, according to police, was shot dead.
In late September, FBI data showed 49 police officers had been killed so far this year, but that number has already gone up with Wednesday's shooting in Connecticut.
Only 49? It's one of the safest jobs you can have. Being a delivery driver. Much less safe. Less safe, is it? I don't know. I'm really tired. Much more dangerous. That's what it is. Lenny alluded to earlier, the jurors in the Parkland shooting penalty phase of the trial. The Parkland shooter pled guilty to 26 counts of murder. So the trial was all about whether he would get life in prison or the death penalty. The jurors sided with the defense, gave him life. We're going to hear from the jury.
Local 10's Leanne Morning is live with more on this. Leanne.
And Louis, it's been a team effort to try and speak to jurors who had a hand in this final decision. Some have opted not to speak out publicly, but we have spoken to a few, including the one juror who did request to see that gun, the gun at the center of all of this, as well as the jury foreperson who spoke publicly and identified himself.
Was it just a gun nut?
Juror number 3 is a probation officer and once worked as a paralegal executive assistant. He told me he was once in the military.
I voted for the death penalty. We did go back there and try and hash things out. And there was one juror that was just very set in what she believed, and that was the life.
He also told me he was the one who requested to have the shooter's rifle brought to the jury room.
I was in the military. I am very well versed in an M4 and a rifle. So I wanted to help elaborate the features that the defendant put on the
You
weapon.
just wanted to see the fucking gun. It made you hard.
For instance, the bipod and as well as the foregrip.
What did those things tell
You getting a chubby right now? We're looking right at his crotch.
While you're implementing those onto the weapon, you have to be thinking about something, whether that is bad or good. And so I wanted to show the jury that it is not extremely difficult to put those on, but it is something that you need a mental capacity to put those on.
Juror number 8 is a gun owner who works in human resources and once worked as an X-ray tech.
Anxious, nervous.
Are you happy that it's over?
Very happy that it's over.
The jury foreman
I
was
bet.
juror number 1, Benjamin Thomas, a gun owner who works in IT. His brother is in law enforcement and his mother is a mental health counselor.
I didn't vote that way, so I'm not happy with how it worked out. But everybody has the right to decide for themselves. It is a moral decision on their own.
It sounds from the jurors' comments that it was one person and only one person that voted for life. Cruz's life was spared because of one juror. The rest of them seemingly voted for the death penalty.
And you heard there both juror number 3 as well as that foreperson both mentioned publicly that there was one holdout that really was not prepared to vote for the death penalty. It seems that the majority of the voters, of the jurors, I should say, were ready to go for death, to recommend that death penalty, except for one of them. So we can also tell you that I did speak to an alternate juror who was dismissed. She was not part of deliberations, but she spoke to me a little bit about where her head was at. She told me that while she didn't really want to elaborate on what she was ready to vote for, what she was ready to select, she did point the finger at the system that she believes failed Nicholas Cruz, whether it was law enforcement, the school district, various entities that she said could have stopped this
Gun
from
laws.
getting to the ultimate deadly conclusion that it came to. And she also said that she really was not surprised to hear what the ultimate verdict was, but says that at the point where she was dismissed, she had not discussed her thinking with any other jurors as per the judge's request. Reporting live in Deerfield Beach, Leanne Morejon, Local 10 News.
I can say as a matter of principle that I am very much against the death penalty. As I've elaborated with this case, this is one of those cut and dry cases where I'm like, you could convince me on this one. However, if you are looking for something punitive, I would say the death penalty is the easy way out. And that life in prison would be far more torturous. If you were looking strictly at a from a punitive sense. I don't think the state should have the power to kill someone. I'm pretty consistent with that. Like I believe a cop's job is to die if necessary to bring a suspect in. That is the way I interpret the Constitution. I don't think the state has the power to just kill people in the streets unnecessarily. So I don't know. It's a tough call. It's a tough call. I do know that if any of you are out there contemplating doing a school shooting, don't. Remember, kids, shoot up drugs, not schools. That's my advice for the children's. But hey, some parents aren't upset about the sickening school shootings happening all over the country. They're more upset about drag queens. So parents protesting the Encinitas Union School District for distributing Queer Fest drag show flyer.
Group of Encinitas parents are demanding answers from the Encinitas Unified School District after the district distributed a flyer promoting a boo bash. That's called the Queerest Family-Friendly Drag Show. And joining me now to talk more about Tuesday's upcoming rally is a concerned mother and community activist, Carrie Prejean Bowler. Good morning. What an honor to meet you.
Nice. I assure you she's being paid by some far-right organization that probably wants to promote school choice or vouchers. What I really wanted to show you was this. I didn't know this was going to be an interview. I thought it was going to be a local news hit. What I'm going to show you is this outraged parent at a board meeting.
I just want to know what it is that makes a drag show family-friendly, because
that being in drag is not inherently sexual, ma'am. That they are fully clothed. They're not doing any kind of provocative dancing. It's just a man in a costume dancing.
if you follow it to its logical conclusion, you can slap family-friendly titles on anything. You can have family-friendly gentlemen's clubs, family-friendly strip shows, family-friendly 50 Shades of Grey read-alouds. Will you approve my flyer?
Hey, Leo, good evening.
And all the sex secrets of the Kama Sutra for kids and families, if it's family-friendly? That's my question.
Wow.
What is it about a grown man, and I honestly, sincerely, as a woman, mean this, what is it about a grown man costumed in a sparkly bra with augmented boobs busting out, a leather miniskirt barely covering his twerking ass with tuck tape on his front while spreading his fish-netted legs?
Yeah, I just want to point out that what she is doing is committing a logical fallacy. Committing a logical fallacy while saying, if you go to its logical conclusion.
As he writhes on the ground, grinding his groin next to a minor, family-friendly. You owe us an answer.
No.
And you know, you don't get to hide by just taking something down off Peachtree and calling it a day. You owe an explanation and an apology to every parent. Listen, you all got caught with your sparkly panties down. And while we have a...
She just said you all got caught with your skirt and panties down.
You live in sexual anarchy?
Now, you guys know I encourage people to kick authority in the balls.
He's kicking authority in the balls.
This is not kicking authority in the balls. This is just blatant trans homophobia, dragphobia, anything that is against the gender binary is scary to these people, and they are allergic to it.
Culture that has a massive problem with child porn, with sex trafficking. You, a little school district board of adults, made the decision to feature an event to hypersexualize young children. Do you want to know that the word that defines that? It's groomer. You all,
of course, you would say groomer.
Pimp for an aligned surgical.
Next thing she's gonna say is like, just go look at libs of TikTok, and you will see all kinds of evidence.
To hypersexualize young children. Do you want to know that the word that defines that? It's groomer. You all played the activist pimp for an Align Surgical Center and for a 21 plus gay bar. It makes you groomers and activist pimps, and we won't have those sitting on a school board who oversees the education of our children. You all stepped out of line. You should be ashamed. There's nothing loving. There's nothing, let's unite and include, because the logical conclusion of that is you end up in diabolical evil.
In diabolical evil, guys. We're going to end up in diabolical evil. We need to repent our sins right now. Activist pimps. The weird thing is she's an activist. I tried to find her ties to organizations that are probably paying her to go and say this shit. I couldn't, but I did find that she also spearheaded an anti-vaxxer movement. He was quite active in the Freedom Revival, an event that took place to oppose mandates. So this is Brittany Meyer. I had a hard time finding her name on all the right-wing propaganda that was circulating around, but her name is Brittany Meyer, and she is involved in a lot of far-right kooky bullshit.
As a conservative, it's getting harder and harder to not look like a kook.
So I wish people wouldn't take these idiots seriously. I'm so tired of it. I gotta go get you an animal video. Hold on. I didn't have one handy. This little dude's eating some ham or some bacon. Shedding tears of joy. Eating bacon. Little dude is so happy.
You live in sexual anarchy?
Not the kitty. For those of you listening to the podcast, the kitty did not request the sexual anarchy. The chat did. Buddy, is he so happy. All right, tomorrow night is Friday. Usually the Troll Patrol's not on, but we will be on tomorrow night. It is a very special night. We get the Georgia Senate debate between Herschel Walker and Raphael Warnock. I do believe that's at 7 o'clock. Check the time on YouTube and make sure, but I'm almost positive it's 7 o'clock. Then we will be back at 10 o'clock for the Friday Night Freak Show with special guest co-host Igloo. Igloo coming on as special guest co-host tomorrow night. I 8-bitted one of my my cartoon pictures of me. Igloos. I kind of, now that I think about it, I wish I'd got like a little penguin 8-bit like that and put like a Fu Manchu on it. That cat is so... Maynard loves ham. That cat loves fucking ham. Apparently Socks likes chicken. Maynard loves fucking ham. Alright, if you're watching on Twitch, let's find out who we are going to raid. I don't think it's time for Echoplex yet, but do show back up for Echoplex. They got the Satanic Panic. I mean, you just saw a little bit of the Satanic Panic at that board meeting. This is like my fourth or fifth Satanic Panic in my lifetime. We're gonna go say hey to Soup for my bread line. I will see you guys tomorrow night for Herschel Walker, Raphael Warnock debate, and then the Friday Night Freak Show with Igloo. Go ahead, light one up, tip one back. It's all right to have a little fun before you hit the sack. I'm Justin FREAKIN. We'll see you tomorrow night on the Troll Patrol Live.